And we're live. Going to post a link to the StreamYard in case anybody wants to join in. I see only one person there right now, but it's posted. How you doing? Looking forward to your broadcast. Thanks, DeFreak. For anybody who's watching this on the other channel, I'm simulcasting this on two channels, on my Eminent Reflection channel and my Donald Kronos channel. So if I'm talking to somebody in the chat and they're not visible in your chat, they're probably on the other channel. But any rate, so the idea behind this live stream, it's unscripted, meant to be a bit of a discussion about the coevolution of technology and communication. For example, and this is how this sort of came up. Someone had mentioned noticing certain patterns in the typographical errors that somebody was making, and asked if they were using a telephone, and that's what sort of inspired me to do this. And I've come across that sort of thing before as well. I've had times myself when I would be able to guess what kind of a device someone is using and what that device is doing to the things that they're typing, or even to the things that they're saying in spoken form. And now, if you're typing something, you might have autocorrect that can change the things you've typed. You might have something that filters out cuss words, or whatever it considers to be, words that shouldn't be said. The Freak says Eric Snowden spoke about this. Yeah, amongst other things. The thing is, well, for example, if you have word suggestions coming up on your device, there's a very good chance that the things you're saying are going out to a server, and that server is figuring out, something about what words to suggest, and then sending those suggestions back to you. Something that corrects typographical errors, the automatic spell checking, things like that, a little less likely to be going out to a server, but again, might be, depending on how it's set up. And these are all things that can affect our communication. Also, when you talk to a computer, when you use your voice to ask a computer something or give a command to a computer, that can be affected by your particular accent, your particular choice of words. The Freak says, he said AI is able to parse all aspects of just typing to identify. Not sure quite what is meant by that, but yeah, an artificial intelligence, basically an artificial intelligence can figure things out from whatever input it has. Now, they don't have the life experience that a human being has, so they've got a disadvantage in that respect. We have the advantage in that we take a lifetime of experiences into the things we're trying to figure out, but we don't have a brain that works at the speed of a computer either. We have brains that are very good at multitasking and quite slow. He says, gave example of timing between keyed keys and such. Yeah, and again, that depends on what information the artificial intelligence gets. Yes, my background matches my shirt. Pavel D says my background matches my shirt. Yes, that was intentional. I'm actually wearing a green shirt with flowers on it, and using a green screen behind me. So, yeah, that was on purpose. And I figured it would go along with the the whole theme of this, having to do with technology, because I'm using a audio-visual media to make this video, and how I look affects the communication, body language and so on. And choice of attire in this case has been altered by the technology itself. So I thought it was rather appropriate. Igor Pavlov? Not familiar. The freak. Not sure what that is a reference to. Yeah, as far as NSA or other government agencies, there again, like I said, whatever they might get, whatever information they might get about what people are typing or what people are saying, it depends on what actually gets sent out there and what of that they're able to intercept. If you have something on your device, for example, that checks your typing as you go and make suggestions, and it's not going out on a network to get that information, and you click suggestions on your device and take those words, that's all happening on your device. So there's nothing that goes out on the internet that can tell, like, did you type that yourself, or was it something that you selected and let the device type for you? So also, if you have an app in your device that modifies your voice before your voice goes out, what gets out there on the internet is not going to include your voice before the modification, if that app is happening on your device. So my nose is bugging me, and I hate that because I'm on screen, which limits the number of things I can politely do about it. Since it's itching me, it's kind of limiting me down to 0 things I can politely do about it, I think, other than take myself off camera and excuse myself for a few seconds, I suppose. Any rate, about evolution. Evolution is, of course, the process of change adding up. Now, when I say adding up, I don't mean it has to be in a positive direction. Subtraction adds up as well. Negative things can add up as much as positive things can add up. Bad things can add up as much as good things can add up. No, in biological evolution, generally speaking, evolution tends to happen in a direction that makes things more fit to survive and pass on their genes in whatever environment they live in. And that is, because natural selection, of course, things that don't survive and pass on their genes, tend not to get their genes passed on. Yeah. Harry says, I'll pay for God to scratch your nose for you. Yeah, well, I can do it myself. It's just I prefer not to on screen, and yeah, it's annoying. But see, that's another thing. I'm using a medium where I'm visible on screen. If this was voice only, wouldn't really much matter. My nose is itching because, I could mute my microphone long enough to blow my nose and nobody really know the difference or whatever. But yeah. Another thing about the evolution of technology and communication, something I would very much like to see, and I've actually been working toward this sort of a goal for basically my whole life, is for humans to have languages that we use to talk to each other that are designed from the ground up to be easier for computers to understand. Because the English language is a good example of a language that is notoriously difficult, complicated in all sorts of ways. Did you snort coke before you came on screen? Just kidding. No, I didn't. Seriously. Um, uh, I don't even like Coke or Pepsi for that matter. Can't imagine why anybody would want to. Never mind. Yeah. And that's another thing. Different meanings of the same spoken word, or different meanings of the same written word. And the same written word not necessarily representing the same spoken word. These are all complications in language and complications in communication that we have to deal with, we humans have to deal with on a regular basis. And that makes it very difficult for a computer, again, because they don't have the life experience that we have. Yeah, Pavel, you're probably right about that. There are certain things that are probably best avoided being tried the first time, because, yeah, humans are susceptible to things like addiction and stuff like that. So, yeah. And yet, even if we avoid all such things, our own biology gives us trouble. I mean, there's just no way around it. So, yeah, I mean, we have to deal with the physics that we're born into and the biology that we're born into, and also the technology that we're born into. And while the physics seems to be pretty much constant, the biology changes very slowly, and the technology is changing quite rapidly. Mm. Yes, yes, Harry. Too much of anything can be bad. This is true. Um, yeah, even air and water can be dangerous. Too much air pressure, uh, too much water. Like if you're drowning in it, that's a bad thing. I mean, those are rather simplified examples, but yeah, too much of anything can be bad. I agree. I guess that's why it's called too much. Now, where does that come from? Too much. Too, a word that in some cases means excessive, and in some cases means also. Much being a word that refers to quantity, so excessive quantity, too much. But we know what it means. I mean, fluent English speaker generally knows what the word too much means. That reminds me of when people learning the Spanish language ask como mucho as a question, a translation of the English how much, and it comes out sounding like I eat a lot. Como in Spanish is the first person present form of the verb comer, meaning to eat. Mucho is, of course, pretty much identical to the English word much. Not quite identical, but pretty close to it. And so, yeah. Yeah, in Spanish, mucho, and in Italian, molto. Yes. Molto is one. Multo is another. I'm trying to think which variations are in which languages. In Esperanto, the word changes based on the ending. So Multo would be a noun. Multa would be an adjective. Multe would be an adverb. Multas would be a present tense verb. Multis would be a past tense verb, and multos would be a future tense verb. One of the things I've spent a good portion of my life working on is taking that sort of muito, yeah, in Portuguese, yeah, muito. Taking that sort of word formation into other languages, or taking the languages into that. Yes, yeah, mi povas paroli Esperanton. Yes, I can speak Esperanto. I wouldn't call myself fluent at it, for the simple matter of fact that I lack sufficient practice, and that has to do with Esperanto speakers being few and far between, so to speak. I would say there's probably 10 or 20 million active Esperanto speakers in the world, and they're scattered all over the place. So if you live in, say, a small country that has an abnormally large number of Esperanto speakers, you might have a pretty decent chance of running into one. If you live in a large country with an abnormally small number of Esperanto speakers, your chances of running into one are quite slim. And the United States of America fits that description. So yeah, I don't have a lot of Esperanto speakers around where I live. 20 million, yeah, I think that's probably a decent estimate. It's hard to really say for sure, because the number of active speakers, of course, goes up and down depending on who's using it and how much using it you consider to be active. I think there are people who estimated the number of active speakers as low as 2 million, and others that might estimate it as high as 100 million. I think the 100 million is really pushing things. But there again, it's a question of what do you mean by active? You know, do you mean used on extremely rare occasions, or do you mean, you know, actually conversing with people on a regular basis, or somewhere in between? And no, the Esperanto course on Duolingo, of course, has brought a lot of people into being able to use the language, and it is a quite useful language. I would say its biggest downside, and this is my personal opinion, but in my opinion, the biggest downside of the Esperanto language is the letters with hats, and that again has to do with the evolution of our technology along with the evolution of communication. When Ludovico Lazaro Zamenhof developed the Esperanto language, printing presses were a relatively new thing at the time. And so he considered printing presses and thought about the fact that, you know, maybe, you know, somebody might not be able to get a hold of or make the letters with hats on them, so to speak. You know, what they call letters with hats. Basically, they're letters with accent marks. And so he had a workaround for it that he put in his original publication, where, for example, the C with a caret symbol over it, the letter cho, you could write as CH. And so it makes the ch sound like in the English CH, which for an English speaker, that might make perfect sense. For a speaker of a language that maybe, for example, like, I think Italian, it seems to me in Italian, the C makes the ch sound and the CH makes the k sound, if I'm not mistaken. So it's completely the reverse. But it depends on what the language is. And I've got bits and pieces of so many languages in my head, I mix them up. So I might get my data wrong about any given language. I'm a little hesitant to say things like that about any particular language for that reason. Pavel says I'm correct. Thank you, Pavel. I appreciate that. Yeah, you know, a lifetime of studying something, and it's just so much information that it's overwhelming, and you get to the point where you know, you mix them up. It's difficult not to. Um, but yeah, the Esperanto language has 28 letters in its alphabet. Of those 28 letters, I think there are 6 of them that have hats. There's, let's see, there's the C with a hat, the letter Cho, the G with a hat, which is the letter Jo, the H with the letter hat, which is the letter Ho, the J with the hat, which is the letter Jo. Let's see, C, G, H, J, that's 4. Um, the S with the hat, which is the letter Sho, and the U with the hat, which is the letter Wo. Now, the only one of them that has a different accent mark than the rest is the letter Wo. That has, I think it's called a brev mark. It's like a U with a little tiny U above it, as opposed to the other 6 of them. The other 5 of the 6 have the like a caret symbol on top of them. And now in my own language family, based largely on Aspara, I've avoided that because you know, modern technology at the time I was making it, you know, at the time I was working on my languages, modern technology was a lot different than when Zamenhof had made the Esperanto language. And so instead of having to deal with the possibility that somebody might not be able to have those letters on a printing press, a physical printing press, where you know, take physical letters and line them up on a plate, on a, you know, on a piece that you put inside the press physically, and literally press the ink onto the paper. You know, you run an ink roller over the letters, and then the letters get pressed onto the paper to print them. It's a different kind of technology when you're working on computers with a computer keyboard. And of course, you know, at the time that I was working on it, most of the computer keyboards, I'm pretty sure, and I don't know for certain, but my understanding is most of the computer keyboards around the world handled the English alphabet. That, you know, there weren't very many international keyboards or anything like that back then. This is a long time ago. I'm not sure if there were any at all, actually. Of course, you know, computers did exist in non-English speaking countries, and they had to have their ways of working around things. But keep in mind, this is not long after the time when there wasn't such a thing as a computer keyboard, when, you know, you put data into a computer through things like punch cards. So, you know, technology has evolved quite a long way since then. Now, the sound Cho, by the way, from the C with the hat on it, is actually it's a plosive. It's a fricative plosive, and it's kind of a blend of like a T sound and an SH sound. So if you write T SH in English, you'll get the same sound. If you were, for example, to write well, like the spelling of the letter Cho in Esperanto, of course, would be C with a hat on it, and then the letter O. If you wanted to write that in English, you could write CHO. And if you wrote TSHO, you get the same thing. Some people might pronounce the two of those slightly different from each other, but basically you end up with the same plosive blend. Now the letter C, and the English letter C, take that same letter and bring it into Esperanto, the written letter. That's the letter Tso, which makes a TS sound. Again, it's technically 2 sounds. It's a blend of a plosive and a fricative, the plosive T and the fricative S. So in Aspara, I would just write that as TS. And in Aspara, the C makes the sh sound just like in Italian. And so to make the English CH sound, I would just write that as TC. And that's sh. So it's a little different system. Now, of course, if you're working on a computer that has say a Cyrillic keyboard and no English letters on the keyboard at all, then having all English letters. Now I say English letters, technically they're Latin, but you know, there's the English letters are like a subset of the Latin alphabet without any accent marks at this point. Although once in a while accent marks do get used in the English language. They're just not standardized in any way. But if you're working on a keyboard that doesn't support those letters, then if you need to use those letters, you got to have a workaround. So then we run into that again. And if you're working on a touch screen device like a telephone with a touch screen and an on-screen keyboard, then of course that keyboard can represent any set of letters you want to have it represent. I have a whole bunch of different keyboards installed on my telephone. What language uses Cyrillic, or however it's spelled? Well, let's see. Well, Russian uses Cyrillic as one. I'm not sure, but I think the Greek letters, do they qualify as Cyrillic? I'm not sure. I should know that. Again, it's so much study, and it just, you know, over the years it just gets to be overwhelming, and then you get to the point where you're not sure what you know and what you think you know. And but yeah, definitely Russian uses Cyrillic. There are variations on Cyrillic, and I think I'm going to just run a web search and see. Here, I'm going to just share a screen, and let's see. Share screen. I want to just share the one that I'm looking at right now, the one that I've got my StreamYard in. So that, and share, and open up a tab, and I'm just going to run a search for let's see, languages that use Cyrillic. Yeah, how do you spell Cyrillic? Cyrillic. And see languages using Cyrillic. And let's see, numeric Cyrillic alphabets. Numerous Cyrillic alphabets are based on the Cyrillic script. The early Cyrillic alphabet was developed first in the first Bulgarian Empire during the 9th century AD. This is just what Bing search brought up by default. In all probability, in Ravna Monastery at the Preslav Literary School by Saint Clement of Ohrid and Saint Naum, and replaced the earlier Glagolitic script developed by the Byzantine theologians Cyril and Methodius in probably in Polycharon. Here, just open the page, Cyrillic script, and let's see, is there a list of languages? Cyrillic alphabets. Here we go. Cyrillic alphabets, Slavic languages, non-Slavic languages, and is Greek in here? I'm just running real quick. Yeah, Greek is listed here, following Latin Greek, but is it listed as Cyrillic? Let's see, parent, Proto, let's see, Phoenician, Greek script, Glagolitic, Cyrillic. Okay, so Greek is an ancestor of Cyrillic script. That would explain why I wasn't so sure exactly what the status was on that. And so I will go ahead and remove this screen share. But yeah, you know, I hesitate to call myself an expert in anything, and I feel sorry for people who do call themselves an expert in anything, because it's a hard thing to live up to. I have been called an expert in lots of things by various people at various times, and I don't really care to have to live up to that. I mean, I prefer to just do the things I can do, trying to make the world a better place. You know, make some progress for humanity, and you know, what I can manage to do, settle for it. You know, I've got a book I would like to get published soon. I keep putting it off. Um, Seraphim Hyde says, I missed a lot of this, was looking forward to it. Hello. Well, it hasn't really been a lot talked about yet. I'm just kind of beating around the bush about things, I suppose. Um, you know, I'm not really sure what all to say, but I do think it's an important topic. If anybody wants to join in here and discuss things, I'm much better in dialogue than monologue, because you know, other people's thoughts are inspiring to me. My own thoughts are just, they're already there, so I don't tend to be inspired by my own thoughts all that terribly much. But yeah, I was talking about, for example, how the Esperanto language was designed to work with the technology of the time, since of course, you know, typewriters. I don't think typewriters were a thing back then, and so, you know, that there was no need to deal with that. If there was, if they were, well, even then, easy enough on an old-fashioned typewriter. If you want to put a caret symbol over a letter, just type the letter backspace and type the caret symbol, or type the caret symbol backspace and then type the letter. Either way, you get that. So it wasn't a difficult thing. Putting those hats on the letters, so to speak, allowed Zamenhof to make an alphabet that made more sense to him. That, for example, the letter C made a t sound like a TS when it didn't have a hat on, and then you put the hat on and it makes a ch sound like TSH from the English. And the letter G made the G sound like a hard G when used without a hat, and then you put the hat on it and you get the J sound, which is like a D and like a French J. J. Listening at 1.75 speed to get caught up. Oh, I didn't know you could do that. I didn't realize you could. Yeah, that makes sense. I think I've tried that before when someone was live streaming and I was behind on it, and the option, seems to me there was no such option. So maybe that's a new feature that's been added. Or maybe I'm just mistaken. But there again, you know, features do get added. That is part of the evolution of the software, and, you know, part of the evolution of the technology in general. And that is of course what this stream is meant to be about, is the coevolution of communication and technology, and you know, how the evolution of one affects the evolution of the other. Now, of course, anything that evolves in an environment with something else that is evolving, they're likely to affect each other's evolution, because they are a part of each other's environment. And this is something that's seen a lot in biology and nature, where you know, species evolve side by side, and diversify side by side, and you know, one species will diversify into a genus with many species in it. Well, maybe, you know, the other one might not branch off at all. Maybe it just changes in a more linear form, and none of the other branches survive. But regardless, they will tend to affect each other, and how one evolves will tend to affect how the other one evolves. if you have something, for example, like the crocodilians, which aren't really all that diverse, and tend not to change forms an awful lot over very long periods of time, but they're very effective predators. You know, that's likely to affect other life forms evolving around them, because you know, they're very good at what they do, and they're very good at surviving in the environment that that they're found in. So yeah, about the Aspara language I was mentioning earlier. Well, it's a Aspara language family, more accurately. Aspara was something I built based on the Pont language bridging system and the Esperanto language. And so it's based on Esperanto to a large extent. It has a 26-letter alphabet instead of 28 letters like Esperanto does. It uses the same 26 letters as the English alphabet and no accent marks. Although in a derived language within the Aspara language family, accent marks can be used. There is also the option to use a Cyrillic alphabet, but it would of course have to be adapted for that. And these are things that, you know, I've worked out details on over the years and lost the details and worked them out again, lost them again. I find it to be an interesting exercise to have to repeat such things and see how close I think I end up to what I had at a previous incarnation of it, so to speak. The first Esperanto phrase I ever learned was "La kato kuras." If I can post that over in the chat, in the live chat, "La kato kuras," and I'll put in the English equivalent of that. The cat runs. The way that works, the word "la," of course, is the equivalent of the English word "the." Now, where some languages have a masculine and a feminine, and sometimes a neuter, and maybe an epicene definite article, Esperanto only has one, just like English. It's just the single word. In this case, it's the word "la." Kato, of course, K-A-T, that's your root word cat, and the O on the end of it makes it a noun. Kuras, kur is the root word meaning run, and then the as ending makes it a present tense verb. So if I wanted to write that in Aspara, I would use the exact same letters. If I'm writing it informally, I would write it just like I did in Esperanto. That is, you know, informally meaning basically if I want to just simplify things and not be as precise about it. But if I if I wanted to write it in, if I want to write it formally, if I want to be as precise as I can, then I would actually add an apostrophe before the word ending on each of those words that has a word ending, and that shows where the stress is. The stress comes at the end of the word stem, and then the word ending is the last thing that comes after the word stem, and the word ending itself is de-stressed. So I'll post that in the chat as well. La kato kuras. That is how I would write that in the language Esperanto, which is the Esperanto dialect, or the Esperanto-based language within the Aspara language family. And if I let's see if I could type that in the chat, ESPERANT apostrophe and then ESPER apostrophe Esperant Aspara. That is the name of that particular language. Now, based on the English language, English, well, we pronounce it ing as if it's ing, and I don't know why. I'm sure that varies from one English dialect to another. I don't think I know of a particular dialect of English or accent of English where it's commonly pronounced English or English, either of which would be more phonetic. But in the Aspara language family, there is one Englic apostrophe English, and ESPER apostrophe. That's the language English Aspare. It's English, not English. The EN is pronounced N, and the GLIC is pronounced glish. So English Aspare. And in English Aspare, if I wanted to type that same phrase, I would type La Cato Runas. And run, of course, is just the English word run. Oops, I capitalized that. Why am I capitalizing that? Let me do that over again. LA space KAT apostrophe O RUN apostrophe AS period without the caps. And should I delete those other ones? I don't know how that, if I delete them, I don't know if they'll show up on the replay or whatever. And since I've already mentioned them, I guess I'll just leave them there. But Lacato Runas would be the cat runs in English Aspare, in English Aspare. And if I wanted to type it in Espanol Aspare, which is the Spanish-based version of the Spanish-based language within the Aspare family, I would type Lacato Corras. Now, it's not been totally standardized. I'm typing it with a double R, and that is specific to the Espanol Aspare language. The double R would normally just be pronounced the same as R twice. In Spanish, double R represents a rolled R. And things like that are allowed in the Aspara language family, that if you have a sound that needs to be represented in order to be clear, or should be represented in order to be clear, if you have to, use a letter with an accent mark that was already in use in that language, or double up a consonant in a way that it works within that language, such things can be done. But how much of that should be done, I don't really know. And this is where, I don't really like having to develop a whole language family for humanity by myself, because this is something that humanity should be doing, not one person who has, limited skills as a polyglot and has a hard time remembering, being able to keep separate what stuff is from which language. Yeah, too many different languages. It gets difficult. At any rate, oh yeah, I'll repost the StreamYard link. Let's see, how do I pin that? Open that. There. And let's see. Okay, I can click show on that, and that'll put it on the screen. I haven't used that feature before. And yeah, if I want to pin one of those, I guess I would have to open the individual live stream for each one. And hold on, give me a moment. So click on this and make sure it's muted when I get in there.
Hold on, give me a...
There, I had to mute it. It wasn't. And then I can click on this and pin message. There we go. Okay. So Sarah from Hyde says, trying to get caught up on the video. Cool. And let's see. And let's see, what was this? Okay, hopefully that works. Yep, and then I can pin that in the chat on that one also. There. So message pinned. So it tells me. Now, how do I unshow that message, I wonder? I guess I could just leave it up there. It ain't hurting anything. Is it? Yeah, it's still showing. Oh, I see. There's a hide thing on it if I want to do that. So yeah, my learning in here also, you know, learning how to use live stream. That's also evolving. So Sarah from Hyde is catching up, and I'm posting stuff in the chat, which isn't going to make any sense if the chat is being seen before I get to the point in the video where I explained it. So there's that. Any rate, does anybody have any questions, any suggestions for, you know, direction to take this in? If anybody wants to say anything in the live stream. Oh, chat users can dismiss it also. Oh, that's right. Individually on their individual screens. Well, but yeah, the one I was talking about dismissing was the one I've got like up on the screen itself. Does that? Yeah, that doesn't come up in the chat, so that's just part of the video. And yeah, of course, if anybody wanted to type it in manually, it's there on the screen to do that. But well, that one's not so bad. I noticed it doesn't have any like a capital I or a lowercase L, which of course those are, you know, difficult letters to tell from each other in some fonts. That's another thing with, you know, the evolution of communication, that, you know, that we've ended up with, you know, like in some fonts the digit 1, the letter capital I and the letter lowercase L can be practically or even completely indistinguishable from each other, and that's an issue. Now, you know, it in some circumstances it really doesn't much matter because the context gives it away. It doesn't much matter, you know, to a human being. If you have a computer trying to do optical character recognition, it can be more of an issue to the computer because they don't have the life experience that a human being has. Go to the beginning of the stream and it works. Okay. Oh, the okay, the speed. Okay, so if you go all the way back to the beginning of the stream, then you can set your the speed to view it at a higher speed. Interesting to note. Thanks, Sarah from Hyde. I appreciate that. Yeah, stuff to learn. And yeah. Now, will that change over time? It might. Now, another thing I know, if you upload a video like this where you've got a live stream going on the video, if you edit that video, if you go in and you like trim the beginning off the video or something like that, like some people they'll put like a countdown on their video before it starts, or they'll start the live stream like a while before they begin the stuff that they actually want in the live stream, to give people time to join in so they've got more of an audience. If you go and you trim that stuff out, then it won't show the live chat replay along with the video. So, and again, that might be something that might change in the future, but that is the way that it's currently set up in YouTube. So I guess I can go ahead and remove that. I can put it back up later, I suppose, but yeah. Oh, I could have done this here when I was talking about the I'll go back over this stuff. Let's see. Lakato kuras. The cat runs. That's Esperanto. Lakato kuras. And if I go to the Esperanto Aspara language and show the equivalent of that, let's see, that would be here, Lakato kuras, with the apostrophes. And again, the apostrophe is optional. It is there for clarification. That is a formality. It's not a pronounced character, but what it does is it tells you where the stress is in the word, and clarifies what part of the word is the word ending. In this case, the O in kato makes it a noun, and the as in kuras makes it a present tense verb. And likewise, in English Aspara, the equivalent sentence would be Lakato runas. There, like that, Lakato runas. And again, you could leave the apostrophes out. Under certain circumstances, that might leave it a little ambiguous as to how to read it. So, you know, I would recommend using the formal writing style, especially if you're, you know, if you're publishing something in the language. Not that I think anyone ever will be publishing anything in an Aspara language, but could happen someday. So, yeah, if that ever happens, I'd recommend using the formal spellings when you're publishing. If you're writing something where you know that a particular word could be taken more than one way, you might want to, you know, use the formal form to avoid that. And let's see, where was the Espanol Aspara? I did put that in here somewhere, right? Yes, here it is. Espanol Aspara. I'll add that to the chat also. The spelling of it, Espanol Aspara. That's Espanol Aspara, which is the Aspara language based on Spanish. Essentially a con language. Yes, it is a constructed language. Esperanto is a constructed language. Aspara is a family of constructed languages. It's a constructed language family, technically. And in Espanol Aspara, that same sentence, the cat runs, would be Lakato corras. And that's I can't roll my R's very well. Lakato corras, with a rolled R, not the trilled R. And because in Spanish, there are words that are distinguished by, do they have a single R or a double R? And the double R is rolled, the single R is not. Now, in the Spanish language, in dialects that I know of in Spanish anyway, I'm not sure, there probably are exceptions, but dialects I'm aware of in Spanish, the R is also generally rolled if it is at the beginning of a word, or maybe it's the beginning of a sentence. It might vary from one dialect to another. In Español Esper, it would depend strictly on what's written. So if it is a single R, you would not be rolling it, even if it is in a position where you would in Spanish. You would pronounce it as a single R if it's written as a single R, and pronounce it as a double R if it's written as a double R. The Esper alphabet in and of itself doesn't account for having a different pronunciation for a double letter than for a single letter. The double letter would simply be the letter pronounced twice, as best as you can manage to do that. And how that's going to sound will, of course, depend on the speaker. In the case of using a language as a source language that has such things, it has, you know, double letters pronounced a specific way for that language, there is a process that needs to be worked out to bring a language into the Esper family, to make an Esper language out of a source language. And that's where the Pont language bridging system comes in. There are certain basically rules for doing such a thing. And some of the rules need to be invented, you know, in that particular case. Yes, all the way to the beginning of the stream. Got it. So, so now I know how close you are to caught up. Talking to Seraphim Hyde in the live chat there, who won't hear me say that for a few more minutes now at least. And by then we'll be almost completely caught up. So French Esper would be another language in the Esper family. French Esper. Oh, did I type the Spanish one? I think, yes, I did, and I goofed. I have to correct my Spanish. I know I put it in there. Okay. Here. Okay. I'll go ahead with the French Esper one first. French is shot would be cat. So that's C-A-T, shot. And of course, the O for the noun ending. So la chateau. Oh, what was the French word for run? Courdir. Okay, C-O-U-R, cour. I had to look it up to be sure. So, Le Chateau, C-O-U-R apostrophe A-S. Oops. Caps lock went on. C-O-U-R apostrophe A-S. And so in the French Esper, the sentence would be Le Chateau. Oh, oops. Hide that. Correction. La Chateau Cordras. Yeah, I don't have enough practice in these things. And there it is. That's That's the Francesper version of the same sentence. Fun in French. Yeah, I do that as well. I mix up the French and the Spanish and the Italian and a bunch of other so-called Romance languages. They've got so much in common, and yet they're so different from each other. I lived on the border of Brazil for a while in Bolivia, and it was an interesting thing there because people on one side of the border would say, in order to speak Spanish, all you have to do is speak bad Portuguese. And on the other side of the border, they'd say, in order to speak Portuguese, all you have to do is speak bad Spanish. And it actually is not all that inaccurate because basically you take the one language and you pronounce it with an accent that sounds like the other language, and you've gone a long way towards switching over to the other language. And then you just throw in a few words that you hear people speaking that other language put in place of the word that you know, and basically you've swapped the language out. And that's, in a way, that's sort of how the Aspara language family works, that each language in the family is derived from the core of the Aspara language family, the core language being Esperanto-Aspara, and all of your closed parts of speech stay consistent from one language in the family to another, and then you just swap out the open parts of speech. So in this case, for example, the word cat, in Esperanto-Aspara, it's kato. In English Aspara, it's also kato, spelled the same way. In the Spanish, in the Español-Aspara, and I should bring that one up and do my correction on it. Let's see, where did I put? Here it is, Español-Aspara. It would be, and I typed it wrong earlier, it would be legato cordras. Like that. Legato cordras. Oh, tried joining the stream and it didn't work. Here, let me put the link back down again. It should still be pinned, but there. That's the link for joining the stream if you want to go ahead and join. Oh no, yeah. If you were in there, I didn't notice. Come on in again, and we'll give this another try. Hello.
Hi.
Ah, it works.
Oh, again, I'm not very smart, so I won't really be able to offer very much. But apparently, Esperanto is a con language, basically.
Yeah, Esperanto is a constructed language.
Cool.
Aspara is a constructed language family, and it started out actually as the Pont language when I was a very young child, which was actually meant to be both a language and a language bridging system. But when I first made it, though, it was mainly a mathematics and logic based language. It had its own vocabulary, and I had no clue what I was doing. And I studied quite a bit of the works of every linguist I could get a hold of, their writings. And when I came across Esperanto, I basically decided to use the language bridging system within Pont to replace its own vocabulary and grammar with the vocabulary and grammar of the Esperanto language, at least for the most part. And so I basically turned it into a dialect of Esperanto with rules for how to bring in words and grammar from other languages.
I mean, from what I'm reading about Esperanto, that looks like it might be actually pretty easy to do because it's made to be a simple language to learn. I was reading about it while I was listening to you. I'm sorry, because I love con languages. I'm not really good with languages. Like English is the only language I know like very well, even not even that well, to be honest. I forget words so often. It's ridiculous.
Well, basically, the idea behind the Pont language versioning system comes from English, and I'll tell you where I came about that. I actually learned to read at an exceptionally young age, and so when I started learning to talk, I was like, how do you say this word? How do you say this word? How do you say this word? Because there were so many English words that weren't pronounced like they were written. And, I had a full vocabulary in writing and I was still learning speech. So, it's like, which spoken word does this written word represent? Because I know what this word means in writing and, haven't figured out how to connect it to speech. So my dad showed me how to use the pronunciation key in dictionaries and, pointed out that they can vary from one dictionary to another. So you have to actually learn that. Yeah. So you'll learn the dictionary's pronunciation key and then you look up a word and it'll have like two spellings of the word. One that tells you how the word is spelled and has little marks in it to show you, where the syllables break up, and then a second spelling that tells you how it's pronounced.
It used to annoy me that the dictionaries didn't have a consistent or standardized pronunciation thing, though, because I would try to, find I would compare the definition of a word from one dictionary to the other, and the variances in the different pronunciation keys were annoying to me, but mostly there were words that I already knew how to pronounce because I live in the middle of nowhere. So,
well, and that's what happens when we don't have standardization on something yet. That's like, if somebody asks you, what is the number pi? Well, you might not know the exact value to any given number of digits, but you probably know that it's the circumference of a circle divided by its diameter. Well, that there was a point in time when that wasn't standardized. And if you ask somebody what's the number pi, if they knew what the letter was, of course in Greek it's pronounced p, not pi, but whole different story there. But I mean, if they understood the question, they would have probably responded with what, in what context.
That's true. Oh, and earlier, so I was trying not to comment on the video while I was watching it. You mentioned Como earlier about which is to do with eating.
Right.
Are you familiar with? Do you ever use TikTok, like at all?
TikTok.
It's a video thing. So there's a video some guy has of him having a conversation with himself, asking about how I eat. The whole conversation is just him saying "como" to himself, and it makes sense because translates in context of how you're saying the word is it's like como was him saying I eat how I eat, basically.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of like the word buffalo. There's a complete sentence in English that consists only of the word buffalo.
I think there were a couple of pronouns in that, actually. I'm not sure, but yes, mainly the word buffalo over and over and over. Yeah, I'm familiar with that. It's something about how many buffaloes can a buffalo from buffalo in buffalo or something like that.
Yeah, it's like the buffaloes bullying each other, bullying other buffaloes. It's pretty nifty. But it's not great that it's like an entire sentence of just the word buffalo. But yeah, a lot of them are proper nouns.
Buffalo as a verb basically means like to pull one over on someone or to fool them. So
yes, that's what it was.
Yeah, and so a buffalo, of course, is referring to the local from Buffalo. So a buffalo from Buffalo is a person living in the city of Buffalo, and so a buffalo from Buffalo buffaloing another buffalo from Buffalo.
But it is pretty neat that you can have a complete conversation with just one word in some context.
Yeah, and yet it's far from ideal. I mean,
well, it's not ideal, and it's also like if you know the person, maybe you'll get it. But I mean, like with the guy with the como thing, like if you had someone who has no context or knows what they're talking about, they're just listening. They're just like the guy saying the word over and over again for no reason.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff like that in human language, And I figure if the Aspara language family ever takes off, and I don't expect it to, I don't really even want it to per se. I mean, it's meant more to show humanity how this sort of thing can be done, because I think it should be done by a team of people, by, you know, mathematicians and poets and linguists and scientists and, you know, just teachers and whatever. Just get together a bunch of people with, you know, diverse backgrounds and build a language family from the ground up, to tie into other languages, to basically potentially eventually replace the old naturally evolved languages that we have now with something that would be more compatible with each other, so switching from one language to another wouldn't be so laborious.
That's true, but the thing about that is you know, a lot of people just don't want to learn a new language, or they're it's too hard, basically. So there is.
Well, that's the key to the whole thing. Think about why learning a language is hard. There are a few reasons. For one, there is the, you know, having to learn a new grammar, having to learn a new way of spelling things, you know, new set of phonetics and stuff like that. Now, if you have something like in the Aspara language, okay, the Aspara language family, every language in the Aspara language family uses Aspara phonetics. So you learn Aspara phonetics once, and you've got it for every one of those other languages. Now, again, you might bring some language into the family that has sounds that are not in the Aspara alphabet, and you maybe have to accommodate them by bringing in a letter with an accent mark or something. So you'd still have to learn those, but at least you would have 26 letters and 26 sounds right at the beginning that you've already learned, and you could apply from one to another. You know, you go into a different language in the family and you bring that with you. Also, your definite article la is the same across every language in the Aspara language family. Your closed parts of speech, like prepositions, are going to be the same from one language to another. Your prefixes and suffixes are going to be the same from one language to another. And again, you might add some in, but this goes back to in the way the language family works, that if you bring it into one language, it should be allowed to be brought into another language as well, and you know, no exceptions. So that way the languages can share parts with each other and become more like each other in some ways. So what you end up, once you've learned one Aspara language, then to learn another Aspara language, you don't have to learn thousands of words from an open part of speech like nouns or verbs, because you already know those words in the source language. You know, if you know the source language, you can move over to the Aspara version of that, you know, the Aspara derivative of that source language quite easily.
So whenever you're posting the cat runs thing, was that from your language that you're making, or was that from the other one?
Yeah, well, in Esperanto, it's Lakato Kuras. I was saying that was the first Esperanto phrase I was ever exposed to. I forget what the name of the book was that I was reading at the time, but I think it was a book. But I do recall that was the very first Esperanto phrase I ever came across. Esperanto sentence, Lakato Kuras, meaning the cat runs. Now, in Esperanto, as I mentioned earlier, it's LA space KATO space KURAS, Lakato Kuras, and that is you know, la meaning the, kato,
yeah, la is
meaning
the
cat,
in a lot
noun.
of different languages, so I
What's
get that. So la
Yeah.
is pretty much you know, understood by most people to mean the, and
Yeah, and that was
certain
the
languages,
idea.
so.
When Zamenhof made the Esperanto language, which he originally named La Lingua Internazia. Actually, it had a name before that as well, but it was earlier in its evolution. I forget what the earlier name was, but when he first published it, it was published as La Lingua Internazia, but he published it under the pen name of Doctoro Esperanto, meaning Dr. Hoping One. and the name Esperanto ended up sticking as the language's name. He hadn't intended it to be the language's name. Users of the language named it that. And when
I even
he
signed up for like a website that the article on it mentioned to learn how to learn it.
Oh, yeah.
I like learning new
yeah.
things, even though I forget them in 5 minutes, but I like learning them.
Yeah, Esperanto can be self-taught, and there's lots of resources out there for doing so. And it's a pretty easy language to learn. Like I said, in my opinion, the hardest part of it is the letters with hats. As a matter of fact, I would type them in and show you, but I don't even know how to do that on this keyboard.
Now,
you know,
by the hats, do you mean the just the accents above them in general, or is it all the same accent above a letter?
I'll show you. Here, we'll do this. Bring up another web page. Esperanto alphabet should come up pretty easily.
Yeah, that's what I was looking up myself because I'm on my laptop.
There's some images. Let's see, Esperanto alphabet, simple English Wikipedia. See if that one actually has it in text. Then I could copy and paste the letters. Yes and no. Here's the letters with hats right here. And if I zoom in on this a bit, and highlight, see circumflex and what the ASCII code is and the Unicode number and
that's pretty neat that they give you all that.
That's the letter Cho. This is the letter Jo. This is the letter This one is the letter Ho. This one is the letter Jo. This one is the letter Sho, and this one is the letter Wo. Notice the U brev is, it's the only one that's got a different hat on it than the other ones. And I say letters with hats because that's actually what they're called in Esperanto. They refer to them as, I mean, what is it? Litero kun chap. Is it chapa chapeta? I'm not sure. Here, try this.
That's also a really neat way to say them because it's explains exactly what they are. They're letters that look like hats.
They're basically wearing hats. Now let's see if I can remember.
So it kind of falls in with the simplified aspect of the entire language.
traduku.net, if I recall correctly. Haven't been there in quite a while. Here, letters with hats. And I can translate that from English to Esperanto by clicking that button. And here it is up here. Here, if I zoom in on this, leteroi kun chapeloi. So that was the word I was having trouble remembering, chapeloi. I wasn't sure if it was chapoi or chapetoi or it's chapeloi. Yeah, that's letters with hats. And you get terminology like that it becomes known through the culture. And Esperanto does have its own culture. It's an interesting thing that it's an invented language. So the culture that it has isn't like the culture of some country. It is literally the culture of that language.
Well, once you get people involved, there's going to be culture that's, added to it as well. And also probably people adding stuff to it to, evolve the language itself.
Harry says the letters should take their hats off and put on a mask.
Why can't they wear both? Why can't they wear their mask with their hats on?
They can have their hat on and wear their mask. Why not?
You can protect your head from the sun and your respiratory system from the Rona.
But yeah, in the Aspara language family, of course, I've avoided the letters with hats because of course when I was making that, computers were sort of a new thing, and typing the hats on letters wasn't too difficult on a typewriter. But to try to do that on a computer where, you know, you're working with ASCII, and of course you might notice those letters that we were just looking at here. Let's see if I bring that back up.
Well, you can either, if you're on like a Windows computer, you should be able to pull up the character map, which are, yeah, character map should have it, or you could do, I think it's
right,
like number lock.
But if you look at the numbers though, if you look at these numbers here, these would be this is the decimal equivalent on the end here. The C with the hat on it is number 264. Notice that is outside of the first 256 characters.
Yes.
Okay, the first 256 characters, that's the Latin 1 code page. That's where most of the Latin characters are, including their accent marks. Notice this one doesn't even fall into that. None of these fall inside of that. They've all been introduced since that first code page. Now, if you go back to before there were multiple code pages, if you only had the one code page, these weren't even an option. And if you go back to before that, when all you had was the American Standard Code for Information Interchange, that only allowed you access to characters numbers 0 through 127. So accented characters just weren't there at all. That was like an afterthought. And so
well, wasn't most of it using the English alphabet anyway? So that's why they didn't really, like, you know, account for characters with accents on it. And also for your language, Aspara, is the name of it inspired by Esperanto, or is it? Did you think of that name completely before you found out Esperanto?
I'm not really sure at this point. I think it was inspired by Esperanto. I'm really not sure because it's been that long. I've lost track. Now the Pont, which was the original language that my Aspara language family was derived from, that was not, because that was from, you know, before I had even encountered Esperanto. But the Aspara, I believe that was derived from Esperanto. In Esperanto, espero means hope. Esperanto is like an ongoing. It's an ongoing verb form of hope with a noun attached to it. It's a little hard to explain that, but the anto ending in that sense is used for people, like an Esperanto being a person who hopes. It doesn't have to be, but it just ended up that way. And
have you considered changing it so that way people won't be claiming that you're, you know, just copying the Esperanto?
Well, that was copying Esperanto. So if they want to claim that, that's fine.
Okay, so you're okay with that then?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Now, the downside to that, where that runs into problems, and like I said, I don't see this as something that I think is ever really going to take off. I'm hoping that it can pave the way for something better. But where it runs into a problem, though, is a bit of a long story. But to shorten it down, there is a language that is now called Edo. It is a constructed language. Was originally named Esperantito, and what that name means in Esperanto is offspring of Esperanto. For example, a kitten is a catito, the offspring of a cat. A puppy is a hundido, an offspring of a dog. So Esperantito is an offspring of Esperanto, and Edo just means offspring. So the Edo language is literally an offspring language.
That makes sense.
Yeah, what happened with that is when Esperanto first started to get really popular, a bunch of people got together and they basically said, you know what, you know, this is great, but you know, there are things that we could improve on it. There's room for improvement. So why don't we, you know, do that? And so there was agreement that yes, you know, we can make this better. And I guess the general consensus was, you know, let's make a committee to like direct this, to, you know, to be at the head of it, and then everybody worked together on it. And they put the committee together, and the committee just made the changes and then introduced it. and said, here's what we're replacing Esperanto with. This is this is the offspring of Esperanto that's going to be the new Esperanto. And that didn't go over real well for obvious reasons, because they just gave people a whole bunch of new stuff to learn, and not all of it was improvement. Also, a lot of the so-called improvements were improvements only from a specific perspective of if you were familiar with Romance languages, and if your linguistic background was not around the Romance languages, or more to the point, if you weren't real familiar with Latin, they made it harder instead of easier.
Well, that's the thing. Like, people just assume that everyone knows the same thing that they know when they're doing that kind of thing. That's why it's really hard to make people change a language, because not everyone learns the same exact way, and it's kind of hard to find how each person will learn the new language.
And Esperanto was meant to be neutral and international, and by doing that, they made it less neutral, although easier for some people to learn. And so I think about a third of the Esperanto community dropped Esperanto and moved over into the Edo community. And of course, for something that was at the time in a vital part of its growing stages, that damaged the community quite a bit. And that left some emotional scars that have held on for generations after that. And so there's a lot of resentment in the Esperanto community with regard to Esperantiroi, or that's the plural of Esperantito. Offspring of Esperanto are looked down on, like that's a bad thing, don't do that, which is really sad, because if you think about it, I mean, the Esperanto language gets referred to, sort of metaphorically speaking, a lot in Esperanto as like an oak tree. And this is kind of like saying, we don't want an orchard of oak trees. We only want one oak tree ever.
Well, because whenever you start adding more to it, or, offshoots, like what I wanted to say earlier was, once you start adding people to it and more people talk the language, you're going to have people making their own dialects of it. They're going to add stuff. They're going to add, inside jokes, or idioms and things like that,
and it happens
double
anyways.
Meanings for words. Well, yeah, it's not it's going to happen anyway, because that's how language evolves.
Yep. So everybody has their own idiolect, and most people don't even realize it. And every language I've ever managed to converse in, I think I've come across the same thing, where you run into people that think there's only one dialect of that language.
How many languages do you know?
People that think there's only one dialect of English.
Oh no, there's way more dialects of English, and there's like so many different ways to put words. Like, I used to work in my work. I used to work in our roadside department, and I had never heard this before. I had some guy calling. He wanted a hot shot for his car. I'm like, I don't know what that is. I had to get a coworker to translate it for me, and it was just basically he wanted a jump start for his car, but he had an accent, and I'm like, I've never heard the word car pronounced that way, so I just wanted to make sure I was understanding correctly.
Yeah, there's an old joke about that. I'm not sure if I can recall exactly how it goes, but something about, in some areas they say, I need to wash my car, and in other areas they say, I need to wash my car. It's like,
I've heard that before too. Like, some people here say wash.
Yeah, so it's like the R got lost in one area and moved over into the other area.
It's just the R just popping up where it's not one. It's like, what are you doing here? No. So how many languages do you speak?
Bits and pieces of a whole bunch of them, and all of absolutely none of them.
Makes sense. See, mine's mostly English, and when I was trying to learn another language, my school didn't actually have other languages, because so you never took Spanish? I never took Spanish. My school didn't have it. I did try learning Spanish online, but I mostly learned how to read Spanish. Like, I could read Spanish pretty well, but I couldn't speak it. Yeah, because my pronunciation is shit.
The grade school, junior highs, and high school that I went to didn't have any courses on any languages other than English. Anything I wanted to learn about them, I had to learn on my own.
Correction, my middle school had it, and then my high school had it, but for high school it was only for like college prep students, and I was part of the vocational program, which would mean I was meant to go straight from high school to work instead of college or anything
Well, I could
Other
be
than that.
mistaken, but I'm pretty sure mine didn't even have it for that.
So whenever I was learning in middle school, I learned how to count to 20. That's about it. And the
In which
teens are a
language?
bit
In
iffy.
Spanish?
Spanish, yeah. The teens
Okay.
are a bit iffy. So, but
Yeah,
that's about all
an
I learned
interesting
there was
thing,
how to just count.
an interesting thing about the number 20, you've heard the word score in English used as a number, right? Like four
Yes,
score and 7 years ago, that kind of thing.
I have.
Okay. Okay, that is a word for 20. And in the French language, that is the number 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17, 18, 19, 20. Okay, 20 is 20, but 80 is 80. That's 4 20s.
It makes sense.
Yeah, so there's no French word for 80. It's just 4 20s. And when you go up above 20, the counting up to 30 is pretty much normal. But then when you reach 30, there's there's no, I could be mistaken. It might vary from one dialect to another, but it seems to me basically you go like 29 would be 29. 30 would be 20. So it's 2010. And 21 is 2011. So so counting is very different in French than it is in English or Spanish.
Well, I mean, a lot of the teens in Spanish, I think, are like DSE, like 10 and.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and those are remnants of base 20 numbering system that our base 10 numbering system is a derivative of, and that base 20 numbering system is in turn derived from a base 60 numbering system. So there are still remnants of those things, which is that's why we have 60 minutes in an hour and 60 seconds in a minute. That goes back to the base 60 numbering system.
Apparently, Paul says it changes at 70, not 30.
Is it 70, not 30? Okay.
Yeah,
and
because
again,
70 is basically 60 plus 10.
Soixante-dix, yeah. And again, it might vary from one dialect of French to another as well. That I'm not sure of. I know France has been very careful about that sort of thing. That's actually where Parliament came for, Parlement, which is literally like the speaking. And the original Parliament was designed more than anything else as a governing body to decide how the language would be written and spoken.
I mean, that kind of makes sense and make things a little bit standardized. But yes, Tobin, Tolkien's language is basically, I forget the name of it, words escape me sometimes, is a very well-known example of a constructed language.
Which one?
Tolkien. I don't remember the name of the language. I should know it because
okay. Yeah.
Tolkien.
Yeah, J.R.R. Tolkien made several constructed languages actually.
Yes.
That are somewhat well known out there.
Exactly. So he's very well known for it since he's got quite a few of them.
They have names like in their own language, and then they have the common names like High Elven and stuff like that. The English names. Yeah, as a matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, his writings were, to a large extent, basically just settings for his languages. I think
the most well-known is the Silmarillion. I can't pronounce it because I'm horrible at pronunciation. I warned you. That's basically a book to include the language in it for that majority of that book. The Hobbit and the other books really don't include it nearly as much as that book did.
Mm. Yeah. Like I said, and I could be mistaken about this, but it seems to me that the whole world that he built his writings around was designed for the purpose of basically housing his languages, and it's an interesting way of doing it. I mean, like, take the Klingon language. There are a lot of people who have learned Klingon, and that is a language that was designed to be difficult on purpose.
So there's an adorable, I guess it's a meme that was, I think, on Twitter of like this couple, like they spoke different languages, but they both knew Klingon, and that's how they got to know each other and got married. I think that's so adorable.
Yeah, it can happen.
So cute.
It can happen. Now, I don't know of any cases where a child has been raised with Klingon as their first language yet.
I'm pretty sure there's some kids that have that as a language, but not their first language, because that would be kind of cruel and, make the kid basically where they're not able to communicate with other children for the most part.
Yeah. Well, if it was the only language their parents shared in common, it's not a matter of being cruel. It might be the way their parents actually communicate with each other in their home.
That is true. That is so true.
And
so another thing about constructed languages is there's like a couple of examples in like I used to do editing for romance novels. A few romance writers do that. I know Kristen Feehan does it. She has one for her Carpathians. I cannot remember the name of the other one because I asked her about it and she was kind of annoyed that I knew what a constructed language was.
She wanted it to be a surprise, huh?
Well, she wanted to like basically make it like I asked her what language it was based off of, and she's like, "What do you mean it's made up?" I'm like, "Well, it's gonna have a base. Every single language that's even a constructed language has a base. What is yours based off of? What is your grammar structure based off? What is?" And she's like, I never thought about it. I'm like, I'm assuming it's English since you speak English. Well,
that's what I was saying. When I first made up the Pont language bridging system and the Pont language to go with it, that's where I was. I didn't know anything about constructing a language. Where I came up with the idea from was, again, I learned to read at an extremely young age. By the time I was beginning to talk, I had already figured out that English was made of multiple languages. I didn't know much about those other languages or where they came from. I had so little background on that. And I also understood that English had more than one dialect. I mean, I started reading the Bible basically as soon as I was old enough to sit. And the King James
a lot of people
are
surprised about
that's not modern English.
I didn't read the Bible until I was 8, and the only reason I read it was because I read a lot when I was younger, and my family was kind of worried about it because they thought I should, go outside, do stuff, and learn a trade or something. And they basically told me, Sarah, the only book you should be reading is the Bible. So they took all my books and they gave me a Bible. I'm like, well, fuck it, I'll read it. I did read it, and I read it multiple times. I just have horrible memory, so I don't remember most of it. But I do remember, thinking this is bullshit, but it's an interesting story.
Yeah. Well, when I read it, it's kind of a long story. I try to keep it short, but basically, my parents figured out that books kept me quiet, while I was still in the crib. And,
see, my family never figured that out. Books kept me quiet, but they're like, you read too much, Sarah. You should not read as much. I'm like, well, would you rather me just run around screaming?
Well, I had this thing when I used to, when I was a baby, I would cry when my dad left, and my mom couldn't figure it out. She figured something's got to be wrong with me. Why was I crying when my dad left? Well, it was eventually figured out that the reason was my dad was studying Morse code at the time, and I was listening to the Morse code, and when he left, the Morse code would quit. But before that got figured out, they did manage to figure out that books kept me quiet. And
I want to learn Morse code eventually.
So at any rate, yeah, they got the thick page children's books and stuff like that you give to babies, and they like chew on them like they're a chew toy or something, and until they fall apart. My dad used to say, kids, you give them books and all they do is rip off the covers and eat the insides. Well, I was an unusual kid. I didn't chew on the books. I treated them like books. And
I treated them like books, but also I feel bad admitting this now. I draw on everything. Like I have to be doing something with my hands. and my mind has to be occupied with something else. So if I'm reading something, I have to have something to draw on. So I did draw on a lot of the books. They were my books, so I guess it was okay at the time.
Well,
now I've just gotten to where when I'm reading, I just have a sheet of paper I draw on.
Of course, I'm talking about at an age where you wouldn't even give a kid a crayon or a pencil and leave them unattended.
Oh, well, my family learned not to leave me unattended because I would draw on anything, and I learned to figure out and find all the.
Or for that matter, actually, probably at an age where you wouldn't give a kid a pencil at all because it's dangerous.
Yeah, please don't eat that.
Yeah. Don't take your eye out with that.
So we had a kid, and then he ate the pencil, and we think he has lead poisoning, but we're not entirely sure right now.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they don't use lead in pencils.
No.
They haven't for a very long time.
Oh no, they haven't. That's true.
Yeah, it was originally they did use lead in pencils a very, very long time ago. That's before I was born. But yeah, the modern pencils are made with graphite. It works much better.
And it's a little bit less toxic. Not much, but a little bit.
Whole lot less toxic actually.
I know.
It's pure carbon.
Exactly.
As opposed to pure lead. Yeah.
But lead adds extra flavor.
But yeah, I had gotten a hold of dictionaries early on. I mean, basically what happened is I would get tired of books, and then they wouldn't keep me quiet anymore. And and so my parents would swap them out for different books, and it didn't take long for them to run out of kids' books. And I got dictionaries and my dad's college books, encyclopedias, anything else that would keep me quiet. I read all of my dad's college books before I could talk.
Oh my god, I read like all the encyclopedias my family had. My family had the big thick sets of encyclopedias, and I would just sit there and read that. My family's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm reading. I'm learning. This is nice. This is interesting." Got more?
Yeah, and so of course, from that, that's like I said, that's where I got my interest in other languages, and also in how the English language had evolved. Don't eat lead paint flakes.
What flavors? I mean, what color flavor is your favorite? I like the blue ones.
What, the lead paint flakes?
Yes, the blue ones taste the best. I mean, they taste like blue, the color, but
it tastes like blue. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Oh, that reminds me of when kids are asked, like, you're gonna get them a slushy drink or something. It's like, what flavor do you want? I want blue.
See, that just reminds me of I don't remember. It's like some video on the internet, and like these guys were trying to explain the flavors of conversational hearts, and they like did all the colors, and they finally got to the orange one. Like the orange one tastes like orange, the color, and it's accurate. That's what it tastes like. It tastes like orange, the color. This thing tastes horrible.
Okay. It doesn't taste like orange, the fruit. It tastes like orange, the color. Huh?
Yes, orange, the color.
Yes, tastes like orange food coloring.
And I will describe foods as tasting like that too. It's like, so what does it taste like? Tastes like blue, the color.
But the English language is notorious for being good at bringing words in from other languages.
Oh yeah, we do that a lot.
But there's no rules.
Not really, no.
It's flexible enough to handle it, but there's no rules. So like the word.
Well, it also goes by like the usage. Like they recently added like a bunch of words. Like they added irregardless to the dictionary because people use it so much.
Yeah. And
they added literally to like the way people use literally. They added that to the dictionary as a definition because people use it so much. Because language is constantly
the
evolving.
metaphorical use of literally.
Yes.
The non-literal use of literally.
Like for the longest time, ain't wasn't considered a word. They added ain't to it because people use it so often.
Yeah, a logical
understood to
contraction
use.
of am not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the word inflammable, of course, was a word that had two completely different meanings. One meaning able to be inflamed, meaning you can make it swell up, and the other one meaning not able to be burned. Yeah. And those got confused, and people would label flammable liquid containers flammable, and then people would get that confused with the word inflammable, meaning not able to be meaning able to be inflamed, or meaning not able to be burned, and they take the able to be inflamed part and translate that as able to be made into flame, and they would label their flammable container material, their flammable materials containers, as inflammable.
That's true. See, whenever you I saw the name of your stream, I thought you were going to talk about like like words like selfie and twerk being added to like the dictionary being used now, because they're used so often, they're added to the dictionary because they're words now.
Yeah, and that is a part of the evolution that the English language has gone through. Now there have been attempts to regularize parts of the English language. For example, and I forget who did this. History is my worst subject, but probably not that hard to look up. I think it might have been Benjamin Franklin. At any rate, there was an attempt to make all of the past tense verbs in English end in T. there were, in English before American English, there were very few past tense verbs that ended in T. And basically the only reason there were any at all is because words that ended in D or ED, but where the D or ED came after like a letter P, where it's difficult to pronounce it that way, slept. For example, it gets difficult to pronounce it that way. People would pronounce it as if it ended in T, and so then they would write what they're pronouncing because spelling hadn't been standardized. And so while they were working on standardizing spelling, in Britain, you ended up with all of these words that the past tense ended in D or ED, and then of course the rare exception ending in T. So they tried to make it so in American English, they would all end in T. The reason being, of course, that those where it was difficult to pronounce ending in D, you couldn't switch those to ending in D. So they decided instead switch all of the ones that end in D to ending in T. And what they ended up with is making the situation worse because it only partially caught on. So
because people would do the ones that they found easiest to do, and then just like ignore the ones that were like, it doesn't sound right.
Well, it was more, I think, a matter of just what ended up being common usage, and common usage was competing with common usage. So you would get people who are going out of their way to try to use this new standard and make it common. Well, you've got other people who haven't even heard of this new standard yet. And of course, they're using what's already common. And so one common was competing with the other common. And of course, you didn't have any, like television news or anything back then to like announce to everybody, that here's this new standard, and we'd encourage everybody to use this so that it can become common. Nothing.
Well, this was in the United States, in America. And I'm pretty sure even back then, people would be pissed off if you told them what to do. It's like, I ain't doing what you tell me to do.
That. Yeah, and there's that. So like the Hangul alphabet, the Korean alphabet, was designed supposedly by one person, and it's a brilliantly designed alphabet. But it was a dictatorship. They could do that.
So I recently got into like Korean dramas, and there's one that has this girl time traveling back to the emperor that made the alphabet.
What was that?
So there's like a streaming service for everything, and one of the streaming services they have is Korean dramas. So I was watching a Korean drama where this girl time travels back in time to meet the emperor that made their alphabet.
Okay.
Which is pretty neat. I didn't know that one man, an emperor, made their alphabet, but he's like everyone needs to learn how to talk and do the same thing. So alphabet.
Yeah, and it was, like I said, it was rather brilliantly made. They have, for example, in Japanese, there are multiple writing systems in use in Japanese.
Oh, sweet languages, yes.
The hiragana is basically the standard Japanese phonetic writing, and each hiragana character represents one syllable. Now the n sound, I guess you could call that a syllable if you want, but it's more of an ending. And so there's that, sitting by itself. But in general, they each represent one syllable. And then the katakana is basically just, it's kind of like italics are in English. That's like the hiragana, but for foreign languages.
Yeah, that's their one for like four languages that they use, because they use a lot of different things. I noticed like
And it's
recently they're
occasionally
trying to use
used
a
for
lot
other
more
things, like
English.
emphasis. But then,
Hmm?
but then they also have the kanji, which is, you know, the Chinese characters brought into the Japanese, and so all these things get mixed together. But the thing is, each syllable character is unique. I mean, you have to learn that syllable character as a syllable, and in the Korean, it's not that way, because your syllable character, it is, each character is a syllable, but each character is also a composite. And so you learn the vowels and you learn the consonants and you put the two of them together, you know, to make a syllable character.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah, it is. And you know, like you've got a vowel that goes this way, you know, vertical vowel, and you put your you know, consonant next to it, or you've got a vowel that goes this way and you put your consonant on top of it. And if you need to end it with a consonant, you put another one underneath. So you can have like consonant, vowel, consonant, either horizontally or vertically. And then they've got some more complex forms that, you know, come out of that for more complex syllables. But the whole thing is, it's constructed kind of like the way the Chinese pictograms are put together, where, you know, you have a little symbol that looks, you know, something like this, that's supposed to represent a human. You know, it's just like two lines, and you know, a little square represents a mouth, and, you know, you put these characters next to each other, and it can mean, like, you know, this symbol and this symbol, you know, with each of their meanings together to make a word that's combining them, or it can mean the sound of this symbol followed by the sound of this other symbol. And so you run into some confusion, especially when you go from dialect to dialect, where the same symbol doesn't have the same pronunciation anymore. And and the combination of two symbols, phonetically, produces a completely different word as a result.
See, I'm gonna show how much of a nerd I am. I watch anime, and like for characters' names, they'll combine the different like Japanese characters. Like they'll have, you know, one that's their base, and the one that's the one for foreign languages, and they'll combine them together, and like the character's name means something because they're combining those two. And I find that very fascinating. The fact that like fans will notice that and, you know, comment on that and figure it out.
So, at any rate, the idea with you know, with the Pont language bridging system, the idea was to make a basically a set of guidelines for how to combine two languages together, or how to set up one language to bring in components of another language. To say, like, you know, if you're going to bring a word in, here are the rules for bringing a word in. Here are the rules for bringing a word in from writing in that language, or here are the rules for bringing in a word from speech in that language. And to make a whole language that way, you know, it's better if you know, when you're making the whole language, because then you don't have to worry about, well, what if you bring in a word from speech and you bring in the same word from writing, and you end up with two completely different words, both representing the same thing. Well, of course, if you're going to make a language, you don't have to worry about that, because you can pick in advance which way to bring them in. And you know, what I found is that, you know, taking them in from writing is generally the preferred method, because of the fact that the writing tends to be more consistent.
Well, that and also writing will be how you'll do a lot of communication, telling and teaching other people how to, you know, interpret your own language as well.
Yeah, books tend to be in writing, not in speech. Now that may change in time, but yeah, there's a bunch of reasons like that. And the thing is, you know, your dictionaries are all in writing, your encyclopedias are all in writing. Writing tends to be around for a while. The written form doesn't evolve as fast. So, excuse me. So there are all these reasons why it makes more sense to bring in a word from the writing. And so that's why, for example, taking the English word cat into Aspara using the Pont language bridging system, the C in cat, because it makes a K sound, gets transliterated into a K. So you end up with KAT, cat. Now it's pronounced in Aspara phonetics. It's written in transliterated English. So you take the English CAT, you transliterate it into Aspara KAT, and then you pronounce it in Aspara phonetics as cat. And then of course the O ending on it makes it a noun, kato. If you wanted to make it a verb, if you wanted to say, for example, I cat, it would say mi katas.
Mi katas.
Yeah, mi katas. That's I cat or I'm catting. Now, if you want to be more specific, if you want to specify I'm catting, I would say mi katant. The ANT ending, ant. That's the ongoing. Or if you wanted to say I cat and not I'm catting, if you want to specify more that way, it would be mi katath.
So right now, all three of my cats are catting. They're napping, to be honest, but that's what cats do.
They cat, yes.
Yeah, they
the
cat.
Cat's cat. La catoi katas.
La catoi catas. Okay. That makes
Okay.
sense.
Let's see. La catoi. La katant katoi. The catting cats. Cat. There.
Just like an entire book about the cats catting and the different ways to say it.
There we go. The catting cat's cat.
So you said the apostrophes, they're not actually pronounced, they're just there to show where the stress goes on the letters.
it's kind of like a space character, except that it doesn't separate words. It separates the word stem from the word ending, and the last syllable in the word stem is emphasized, and the word ending is de-emphasized by default. So la katant katoi katath.
So you don't put the emphasis on the wrong syllable.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, and of course the emphasis is always going to end up in the same place. That way, it's always going to end up, like I said, on the last syllable of the word stem. So if you wanted to say the catting kittens cat, you would change that to la katant katetoi katas, or katath rather.
Oh, that's pretty neat.
Let's see. Did that work?
Did what work?
Oh, yeah, I guess that's on there. The katant katoi. No, that's not right. Oh, it didn't. I see. It didn't scroll down far enough. This is the one I was looking for. Putting that one on the screen. The katant.
Yeah, sometimes you have to scroll down for the chat to show the last message.
Yeah, I didn't realize it hadn't scrolled down, and I'm going, where is
Not very nice to do that. Thought you broke it, didn't you?
Yeah, something like that. Something was wrong.
Like I broke the YouTube. So knows.
Yeah. So yeah, kateto is a little cat. Actually, if I wanted to make it kitten, I had meant kitten. I didn't write kitten. What I wrote was actually like small cat. Kateto is a small cat. A katego would be a big cat, like a lion. Kat id oi katath. And this would be the kitten's cat. What? Yeah. Okay. So the catting, KATANT, katidoi katath. That's the catting kitten's cat. Now, in I mentioned earlier in Esperanto, the word for dog is hundo. In Esperanto spare in Esperanto spare, it would also be hundo, HUND apostrophe O. You put the apostrophe in when you're
I'm just
writing
glad
it
it's not
formally.
doggo.
In English, it would be.
I know. Sorry, internet thing.
There. And that would be, oops, I got a double A in there. Let me retype that.
See, the only person who notices that is you. Actually, someone in the audience might understand the language.
Yeah,
I have no clue.
They'd probably notice. They might think that I meant it that way.
Exactly. I thought you meant to do it that way. I thought, like, oh, sweet. I don't know how to pronounce a double A. Hope it's not rolling R's. Like, I can't roll my R's to save my life.
Yeah, how do you pronounce a double A? Dog. Yeah.
You scream.
Yeah. Dog. That would be dogant.
Doggone.
And
So I was reading your description for the video, somehow how a few changes in a phrase can make a big difference and potentially leave the result hard to understand and perhaps even easier to misunderstand. I don't remember you going over that.
What was that again?
I was reading your description of the video about how, you know, a few changes in a phrase can make a difference in how it's understood or misunderstood.
Oh yeah, I think that was in reference to, you know, like if you've got if you're using, for example, voice to text and it hears you wrong, or if you're
voice to text isn't a perfected thing though, and also you know it's going to hear a lot of things wrong, or especially you know some words do sound exactly alike. Like I noticed a difference. Like my roommate loves to use text to speech, and it gets the version of there wrong every single time. It's like always the wrong version of like.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. You can teach it grammar, but then once you teach it grammar, if you meant the wrong version, it's going to give you the right one whether you meant it or not.
Yeah.
You know, it'll give you the one that it learned to put there
to use as the correct one,
regardless whether that's the one you meant. And yeah, here's another. This one says la dogidant dogidoi dogont, and what that is the puppying puppies will dog.
Well, it's kind of like you know, if you can teach it grammar, and also with the
it's the puppying puppies will be dogging.
Well then. But the thing with like the teaching and grammar, like I know at least with Microsoft Word, that's what my work uses a lot. You know, like you can teach it how, you know, common things that you use to correct it. Like I used to do that whenever I was writing too. Like with my character names, I could, you know, teach it to where I typed the name in and it wouldn't correct it to something else because it knew that was the name that I meant.
Yeah, those that can actually be taught.
But then there was also like the thing of someone like purposely typing like I just did now, like I am on my PC, like different versions of the words. But since they're, you know, words that work, it wouldn't correct you, so people wouldn't know that they were making mistakes because it's technically you know, correct.
Yeah, and if you teach it to if you teach it to do what you generally would mean when you don't mean that, it's not going to know that you don't mean that.
Exactly. I mean, it can only, you know, learn certain things. It can't learn context, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there again, like I said, that has a lot to do with the fact that the computers don't have our life experiences. You know, and what's more, you know, languages are lossy encodings human languages are lossy encodings of our thoughts. We take our thoughts and we encode them down into something that distills a lot of stuff out of them. And so some of the stuff has literally been lost. And, another human being might be able to fill it in from their experiences. And they might fill it in wrong because their experiences might be different. But the computer wouldn't be able to fill it in from its experiences because it doesn't have them. And if it's not even represented, how would it even know there was anything there to fill in?
That's true.
So yeah, so like I said, what I hope with the Aspara language family is that it can help teach people that this is something everyone can do, and that maybe I'll be able to encourage humanity to make a concerted effort to come up with a better means of human communication. And to
are you
bridge
planning
this
for
idea,
like something like in a lot of fantasy stuff where they have like basically a common language essentially?
Possibly in the very, very distant future, but not as a short-term thing. No, I'm thinking more in terms of, like, right now we have a bunch of languages that have so little in common, and of course other languages that have more in common. But I mean, just the whole idea that to learn another language, you have to learn, in general, at the very least, thousands of new words, and then usually also you have to learn a whole new set of grammar and a whole new set of phonetics. In some cases, you may have to learn an entirely new set of written characters as well, in order to read or write the language. And in many cases, you have to learn brand new speech sounds that you didn't know before. And so it's an overwhelming task to learn a second language. Learning a third language is comparatively easy, but then you've already got two languages in your head, and you've got to add that third one on top of them. And the human brain isn't really well set up for keeping a lot of languages separate. So
no, especially not after a certain age. Like when you're younger, it's easier to learn languages than it is when you're older. But the only thing about that is, since it's a constructed language, your language is going to be, based off of stuff that you already know. So people trying to learn your language that don't typically speak. So I'm assuming, like, from what sounds like, your main language is English. So a lot of your stuff is going to be based off of English, I'm assuming.
Well, the English Aspara is based off of English. Espanol Aspara is based off of Spanish. So the idea is to have the ability for anyone either to have one that's already been set up for them, or to set one up in the first place and basically make a language that is based on their language and based on Esperanto, or on the Aspara language system, and to be able to work with other people to build a new language that can be used as a sort of a bridge. Because, for example, if I didn't speak any English, but I learned Espanol Aspara, and you didn't speak any Spanish, but you learned English Aspara, you could speak English Aspara to me, and I could speak Espanol Aspara to you, and we would understand a lot of what each other said because we've got the same pronouns and the same prefixes and the same suffixes and the same conjunctions and of course the same definite article. And so there's all this stuff that we share in common. Where the accent is put on the word, where the stress is put on the word is the same. So we've got that in common. We can tell, I can tell what words you're speaking are meant to be nouns because they're specified that way. You can tell what words I'm speaking are meant to be adverbs because they're specified that way. And, so learning the vocabulary of each other at that point would be much easier because we could hold a conversation in a shared base language about the vocabulary.
Oh, that makes sense. Now, have you asked people, since your language is based off of Esperanto, have you asked people in the Esperanto community to help you out with it or work on it with you? Since you mentioned that you wanted different people.
I have tried, and I sort of touched on that earlier, where the problem is that the Esperanto community in general tends to reject descendants of Esperanto as they're all a bad thing. And it's not everybody, but it's the vast majority of the Esperanto community. Even if they don't know the story of how it got that way, it's just like built into the culture that there's animosity toward the idea of evolving the language into anything new.
That makes sense. People do get attached to things and don't like change, and like what you mentioned, like the Ito part of it, like, you know, it tried to make it easier, but it ended up making it a lot harder for most people. So they're probably just assuming you're doing the same thing, making it easier for people that
it wasn't even
the same base language as you.
It wasn't even the fact that it made it harder for some people so much as the fact that what happened damaged the Esperanto community.
Yeah.
And you know, and that has left this sort of lingering feeling of fear within the community, of fear of any offspring of Esperanto, that it's going to damage the movement, it's going to damage the community. And even people that have no idea where that came from tend to share that fear. That, you know, it's been passed on indirectly and unintentionally by other people. They have it without even realizing they have it, and it manifests itself in some rather interesting ways.
That's kind of weird, because I'm assuming they're not, like, you know, directly, you know, communicating to each other. Don't trust, you know, derivatives of this language or anything like that. But like they all have this fear ingrained in them since they're part of that culture.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little of both, but yeah, I have ran into people that had no idea that there was a such thing as the Ito language, let alone, you know, how that happened, and yet had bad feelings about the idea of a language derived from Esperanto, even though Esperanto itself was a language derived from other languages. So, you know, it just seems kind of counterintuitive.
That's true.
But yeah, the way I look at it, you know, Esperanto did, before I was born, a lot of what I was trying to do early in my life, and that is to make a sort of island between languages that could be used as a like a hub that you could bridge, for example, from English to Esperanto and from Esperanto to Spanish, and then you've got a path to get from one of those languages to the other. Now, Spanish is not one of the languages that Esperanto was based on, but it is the language that it's the language I most often hear that it's similar to, and it is.
It does be similar to it from like the stuff that you've just written, and you know, since the guy who made it's Polish, that's kind of surprising. But with learning, so I did try to learn Spanish, and then I had a friend who was trying to get me to learn Polish. There are a lot of things that are kind of similar between the two languages anyway.
Yeah, English was one of the languages that Esperanto was based on, and Zamenhof did not consider himself fluent in English. He had learned some English, and you know, he tried to use the language in making Esperanto as one of the base languages, but it wasn't a language he considered himself fluent in. And when the book had to be translated into English, he first had one person translate it, and then he had English speakers tell him that, you know, that translation was no good, and so then he had someone else translate it and basically did away with the first translation or something like that. And it is an interesting thing how that works, because, you know, he had to basically take other people's word for it, you know, how good of a translation into English it was, and yet English is one of the languages he based Esperanto on. And I've done sort of the same thing, because I am not much of a polyglot. You know, I've got little bits and pieces of all kinds of languages in my head, but you know, and several of them I have been at one point or another in time somewhat conversational in, but no one to converse with, and so they go away. You know, I can't hold on to them that way, and you know, so I'm not one of these people that, you know, it's like fluent in a couple of dozen languages or something. at any given time, I couldn't even tell you how many languages I'm fluent in, but I can tell you it's very few.
I don't even think I'm fluent in English half the time because, again, I forget words all the time. Like I do see it, like, again, I was reading about Esperanto while I was listening to you, and I see that, a lot of people are, they're complaining about the fact that it's so similar to the Polish that was used in his region that he grew up in, which, that's to be expected, though. Like I mentioned before, you're going to base it off of something that you're familiar with. It has to have some basis for the language that you're creating.
Yeah, there are definitely elements of Polish in it. There are also some very definite elements of Russian in it, and Russian is the language he considered to be his mother tongue. By the way, Varsovia, or Warsaw, which is now part of Poland, was part of Russia at the time.
I'd rather not think about Warsaw.
I'm just saying that,
I know.
So, but that's the whole thing. There were like 5 different languages commonly spoken there. There wasn't any like national language, and there was no agreement on like, this is the language, this is the one language everybody has to learn. So instead, it was, like one community would speak one language, and another community speaks another language, and a third community speaks a third language. And if the people from these different communities want to talk to each other, they have to speak, one or another of them has to speak a language that's foreign to them, and then be at a disadvantage. And there were all kinds of misunderstandings that would happen that way. So, Zamenhof was basically thinking, well, all these misunderstandings lead to all kinds of conflicts, and so if we could get rid of the misunderstandings, we could get rid of the conflicts. And so he figured, one shared universal second language could lead to world peace. And
it wouldn't necessarily lead to world peace, but it would be, very useful.
Yeah, it wouldn't necessarily, but that was what he was thinking.
But I have noticed that when people are learning, like, especially like later in life, like, I'm 36, like me trying to learn Spanish or even Polish, like I learned more strict rules than most people that, speak it natively do. Like, my friend was telling me, like, in Poland, they really don't use the word I, like they don't use that, but every single thing that I was learning taught me to use I. He's like, they'll know you're not a native speaker if you do that. And that's not something that they do. And like, people who are learning English, like they know really strict rules of English. They use very proper English. Like you can tell someone that when they call in, aside from their accent, how they use the language, that English isn't their first language, but they've learned it very, very properly and they're very good at it.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing that, what you just pointed out as well, that sometimes if you speak a language too well, it highlights the fact that you're not a native speaker. And I actually have had people in at least a dozen different Spanish-speaking countries tell me that I spoke the best Spanish they'd ever heard.
Well, yeah, like whenever I have customers, like people who come over from Africa and they'll learn English. They learn very proper English. A lot of them will not use contractions. Like they'll say I cannot. Like people who are like native speakers say I can't.
They speak very clearly and they sound like a foreigner, and I like it.
Oh, I love the way they speak because they speak so properly. They do use proper grammar. I love it because I'm in the South and I can't stand people who butcher the English language. So it's nice to speak to someone who's like speaking it properly and doing it correctly. I'm like, I love the way you speak. I just want to talk to you like the entire day.
And this is kind of where I'm coming from. And Pavel, I agree with you. Spanish is very simple compared to a lot of other Romance languages. The one exception to that, I would say, in my opinion, is the Spanish verb tenses, because there are an awful lot of basic Spanish
God,
tenses.
there are so many tenses. Whenever I was trying to learn it, it's like I'm tired of these tenses. It's like there were lessons specifically like 6 or 7 languages for like just the tenses. I'm like, no, I can't do this. But like with English, I only learned the 3 tenses. And like speaking to people who've learned English as a second language or a third language, there's so many more tenses that we aren't taught as English speakers. They historically exist and they're just not used anymore. Well, they are used, they're just not used by like especially not in America. Like I have a coworker, she she's
Some
older
of them
than
aren't
me.
used at all anymore. Some of them are
Oh
used
no, a lot of
rarely.
them aren't used at all. But she's talking about like when she was in school, like they learned all the tenses, and she was like surprised that I only learned the 3 tenses. I learned past, present, and future, and she's like, well, what about future, present? Like with that?
Yeah.
Can you do that
Past
one more
perfect,
time?
future perfect, and all these other
Exactly.
things.
Because like I had someone on the internet trying to like quiz me in different tenses. He's trying to say that I'm not an native English speaker myself. I'm like, I do speak English natively. It's just I've never learned those tenses. Like that's not taught in our schools because we don't really
and that's
pay that much attention to it. To
one
be
of the things
honest.
that I'm aiming for with the with the idea behind the Aspara language family. One of the things I'm aiming for in that respect is to make it so that these less common forms of something can be learned later in life. That you can start out with the basics. That like I mean, it's designed to be learned by babies. So that you don't have to wait until you're like old enough to learn to talk or old enough to learn to read. That you can start right away. For example, the word "ga." It's a very vague word. It's intended to be baby speak, so to speak, baby talk. And "ga" basically, it's a vague word, sort of meaning like go ahead, or your turn, or like talk, communicate. It's a general communications word, and I think it's probably like the most vague word in that's built into Esperanto spare, and as like a key component of the Aspara language family. But then there are other words in that same set. For example, "ka" means please, or basically it's a request word. And again, it's a little bit vague, but that's on purpose, because the English word "please" um, comes from the phrase "if it pleases you," meaning like if it'll make you happy, go ahead and do it. That's not really much of a request. It's more like an offer. And when you translate "please" into some other language, um, well, for example, in Spanish, it becomes "por favor," by favor, meaning like do this for free. Do this as a
Yeah.
favor. Don't charge me for it. And so you take something that means do this if it pleases you, and translate that into do this without charging me for it, and you've changed the meaning. But of course, when people say "please" or they say "por favor," they don't mean those things. That's just where it came from. And so
Well, a lot of words have also lost like their original meaning, like
yeah,
please
exactly.
and por favor.
Exactly. And they've evolved. And so, like I said, in Aspara, "ka" fills that general purpose. The again, "you're welcome" in English, or in Spanish, "de nada." De nada means of nothing, and that's way different than "you're welcome." You're welcome is like you're welcome to it. De
See, a
nada
lot
is
of people, or a lot of things when I was trying to learn Spanish, de nada, they basically translated as being like no worries or no problem.
Yeah. And that's
apparently
the thing.
people get offended if you say no worries or no problem, because I say that quite often. I've had like people who are older than me get mad at me, like, what do you mean it's no problem? Like, I mean, it's like,
Yeah. Well, that's
wasn't
the
that
same.
bad?
That's
It's
the
like, it's
same.
okay. You don't have to apologize for it. You have to tell me, like,
Well, that's
it's
the same as
fine.
you can offend someone by saying "de nada," because if somebody's trying to tell you how important something was to them, and they're telling you, "gracias tanto," thank you very very much, thank you so much, and you tell them "de nada," you might is in essence be transferring the meaning of what you think was so important was nothing.
Yes, that too. And also people think like it means like whenever I say no problem, they
Rien,
mean
yeah,
like,
another French
well,
rien.
you meant that you had to do it. I'm like, well, yeah, it's my job, but it was no problem to do it.
Yeah. And so that's why I said in Aspara, I mean, you can take those words from those languages if you want and bring them into Aspara and use them, in that particular language in the Aspara family. But there's no need, because there's a set of simple words that are set to use that, to serve that purpose in a more generalized sense without having to carry those very specific meanings. They're just politeness words. And so ka is the politeness word for a request, and ta is the politeness word for thank you, and then da is like the politeness word for the equivalent of you're welcome.
My roommate's dog came in my room. Hi, Missy. Back to your thing on the word ga. That also brings me to another thing when people are trying to learn like a second language, is that they'll try to, compare it to things that they're used to. Like ga could, technically be compared to go on or continue. You mentioned. So people are like, oh, well, that's basically like go. It's just different.
Yeah. Yeah, it's intentionally made similar to several words in several different languages. And of course, there's going to be languages that it's going to be similar to like something that means just the opposite or whatever. These things, they're bound to happen. But like the word da, for example, one of the things that was taken into consideration in coming up with the word da to be used as like a you're welcome is in Esperanto. The word da is used as a preposition, meaning like a portion of something, or an amount of something. And the idea there being, if somebody says ta, meaning thank you, you say da, meaning like a portion of the thanks back to you. And so there is some meaning. There is some meaning there derived from Esperanto, but at the same time, there's also consideration of the Russian word da, meaning yes. So somebody says thank you, ta, you say da, as in like yes, thank you too.
Makes sense.
So but another one that makes a good memory aid for that, and this was purely by coincidence, but just an observation. You know how people say, people request something, they say, can I have that? And they're like, you didn't say the magic word, meaning, you didn't say please.
Give it now. Oh wait, you mean please? Sorry.
Yeah, the magic word. Give it now. Okay, well, ka being the magic word, ka is of course followed by ta and da. So say the magic word. What comes next?
Now.
Ta-da.
Ta-da. Please don't eat the cat. Sorry, roommate's dog.
Don't eat the cat. Yes, probably not a good idea to eat the cat.
She's okay with like two of my cats, but like my younger cat, she does not like her like at all. She'll chase. Well, I guess she likes her. She just chases her because small cat.
Likes to chase her. Yeah, that's it.
She likes to chase the small cat because the small cat will run and not try to fight her like the other two will.
Yeah, speaking of small cats, that's like I said earlier, when I meant to put kitten, catito, and I put instead I meant to put catito, and instead I put cateto, which is a small cat.
Again, none of us would know except for you. We'd be like, oh, that makes sense. That's exactly what he meant to do. Kind of like the on the dog.
Yeah, it's basically the equivalent of the Spanish diminutive eat. Like in gato would be gatito would be like a little cat, like un gatito. in Esperanto, in Esperanto, et is the suffix that serves that purpose. So bringing that into the Aspara family, then of course, if I'm speaking Espanol Aspara, if I say un gato, and un, by the way, is actually an Aspara number, just like the Spanish number, but so that one works both ways. But un gato, if I wanted to make the gatito in Esperanto Aspara, it would be gateto. But then you can do that with any noun, any word at all, really. That you can make a diminutive of a noun, of a verb, of an adjective, of an adverb, or whatever. And so, in Spanish, you can do that with any noun or any adjective. In English, you can do it with some nouns and not others.
That's true.
The English diminutive is usually just like adding a Y on the end or something like that. It's not 100% consistent. Sometimes it's chopping a word in half and adding a Y on what's left of it. And there is something like that in Esperanto as well, and that's actually taken from the Russian. For example, patro is the Esperanto word for father. The Esperanto word for mother is patrino. Now, where that comes from is the in suffix in Esperanto is a feminine suffix. Now, when Esperanto first came out, there was no masculine suffix. There was only a feminine suffix. So anytime you wanted the word to be masculine, you had to use the default form, which means the default form had to double as both the masculine and the epicene.
Paul wants to know if you have a website for your Esper.
Right. I have had websites for it in the past. I don't have any of my websites anymore. I've published things in various places online, and over the years, sites that I've had things published on have shut down and disappeared, and stuff has been erased off of them and all kinds of stuff. So
I've had that happen.
I really got to get it published in physical book format because it just lasts longer.
I mean, if you, I do think like it's not that expensive to do self-publishing. Well, that's digital publishing through Amazon. If you did that.
Yeah, I've got it in the works, and actually, I'm gonna have to spend a lot of time on that. And I've been thinking about, maybe doing some of that actually in videos, and just, I don't know about, if I should record them and then play them or live stream while I'm actually doing the editing or whatever. But, just because it's easier for me to do something for someone else than for myself. And I still
a lot
feel
of
like
people, when they're doing editing, they'll do like the editing stuff on Twitch and live stream that, and then they'll do like the finished video after they edit it on here on YouTube. I've noticed people do that a lot.
Interesting thought. Yeah, I
because that's what I tried doing, because I do art, and I'm like, well, I was trying to figure out how to do the live streaming first, and I did it first on Twitch, and did that, and I post my videos here on YouTube once I finish not editing them, once I finish adding music to it.
I've also considered, like, if I do live stream, I mean, I would like to get help from other people, input and stuff like that, and ideally I'd like to credit people that have helped. But if I start live streaming and I end up with all kinds of different people, one helps out a little bit, one helps out a little bit, another one helps out a little bit, am I going to end up with a few hundred names I've got to put in there, and some people using names that aren't their real name, and nobody would know who they were anyway, and so I'm not sure what's the best way to do any of this stuff. But in the end, I'm just going to have to go ahead and do it, and just know that I'm not going to be doing it the best way, because I don't know what the best way is. And
for that, you could ask people, basically, because a lot of people, they'll help with something, but they don't want to be thanked. Like, they don't want their name out there. You can ask people, to sign something, or to put something like, hey, if you want to be recognized, tell me what your name you want to use, and can I say your name on air, or can I just say, various other people to talk about you, since you don't want your name on the internet as well. Because, like a lot of people, they'll have, well, YouTube was doing it for a while because they're part of Google. They're trying to make people use their real names for everything. It's like, I'm not putting my real name out there. You can forget about that. That's my name. Milk and Hess.
Yeah, I'm just looking on Wikibooks. There used to be a spare page on Wikibooks, and that seems to not be there anymore.
Well, yeah, they do purge a lot of stuff.
So yeah, like I said, there's been a lot of stuff out there. I've had quite a few things I've published over the years, and stuff that I've saved on hard drives that I don't have the hard drives anymore, or the computers that the hard drives are on anymore. Things I've saved on discs that I don't have the discs anymore. It's just, over the years, it's been loss after loss after loss. But at the same time, I figure.
See, the reason I do that, put stuff on different things, is because I have a tendency of deleting my stuff. So if I put it on different things, there's always going to be that one thing I forget to delete. So that way, once I'm done deleting stuff, I start getting mad at myself, like, oh, fuck, I just deleted all my work. there's that one thing that still has it.
Hmm.
Not that good about doing that with my writing anymore, but I do that with my art. So my art's on a bunch of different places, so that way whenever I go on a deleting spree, it's going to be somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I've lost so much of things I've intended to publish in the past. I've had several books basically all done, editing and everything ready for publishing, and then lost the whole thing, backup copies and all. And so I do have more of a tendency now to keep stuff in several places. But then I have the problem of I'm not any good at keeping track of which one was the most up-to-date one. And so then when I go to edit it, it's like, am I editing the newest one, or am I editing one of the older ones?
I've only written one book, and I lost that because my stepbrother stole my USB drive, and I didn't have any backups of it because I didn't know any better back then.
So yeah, what I'm hoping to publish sometime soon, it should have at least a chapter on the English Aspara language. I had wanted to put in several different Aspara languages, and I kind of decided it would be better to just concentrate on that one for now and on the basic concept behind it. I don't know if that's a good way to do it or not, but again, like I said, I don't know the best way. I've just got to do something.
I would recommend changing the name and trying to separate it from Esperanto because of how adverse they are to languages that are derivative of it.
Yeah,
so I
it
would
is what it
recommend
is.
trying to distance yourself from that. So that way maybe you can get more people to help, because you're not probably going to get much help from that community since they're so hard-headed about everything.
I'm not going to worry about it. It is what it is. And, I mean, like I said, in the long run, I don't think it's anywhere near the best that we can do anyway. I really think that if we want to do a language right, that we should start out from something like set theory to look at look at basic mathematics and set theory and stuff like that, and start by building a language where babies could learn set theory. And I think we'll be doing a lot better from there, because for example, the word be, the English verb to be, it's so vague. It can mean so many different things depending on the context. And there's actually a version of English out there called E prime, where basically the idea is that you use English without the word to be. And it's hard to do. It takes practice, but it's so much clearer. Because, if you say, for example, the ball is red, do you mean, again, if you take out all of our experiences and you're just trying to analyze what's meant by a sentence of that form, do you mean that ball and red are the same thing? If the ball is red, does that also mean red is the ball? Do you mean that the ball is a subset of red? That it is a thing that is red, or that it is a part of all of what is red? There are just so many different ways that you can take that to be. So if you just throw that out entirely,
that's also just taking it too literally, though. If you're thinking to it that much. But yeah, I get how, like, if you take out your experiences, you wouldn't think that it's describing the color of the ball. Some people could think it's like the ball and the red are the same thing, or
are
both.
they equal? Is one a subset of the other one? Is one a superset of the other one? Is one a proper subset, or is it are they both the same set? And so that's why I say, if you start with something like set theory, I think you'd have a better grounding point. But this is something I don't think I should be deciding either. I think this is something that linguists and scientists and artists and people from a diverse set of different fields should be getting together and saying, let's experiment with some of these things and learn from it and then build something from there. And but yeah, I mean, if you want a computer to be able to understand human speech and to understand it well, you've got to be able to work around such things. Now, once a computer has a way of getting enough life experience and getting enough experience talking with people and looking stuff up on the internet and whatever else, maybe we can get around some of that. But as I was saying earlier, the idea behind Aspara, from the ground up, it's meant to be able to handle both vague and precise. And that's something I think needs to be acknowledged in human communications a little more explicitly, is the fact that we do need to be able to communicate things clearly, but we also do need to be able to communicate things vaguely. You can't just pick one or the other and call it good enough for everything.
Well, you also mentioned that you designed Aspara to be basically learned by babies. Does that also mean that it's not going to be something that like an adult can comprehend as well? Kind of like oh
no, not at all.
Common Core math, basically. It's like only children can understand it, and the people that are teaching it, basically.
No, not at all. It's meant to be both. The idea is to make it so that a baby can learn as early as possible. At least how to communicate general ideas and how to understand general ideas, so that basically an adult could speak a subset of the language to a baby, and the baby could understand that subset of the language and speak that subset of the language early on in their development. And to be able to speak more precisely would mean having to add more stuff to it.
Oh, okay.
So
that makes sense.
It's kind of like when people talk about evolution, and they.
Well, my other example was going to be the song "New Math" by Tom Lehrer.
What song?
"New Math" by Tom Lehrer. He is a mathematician he's a mathematician that turned to basically comedy writing. He's a mathematician again. He teaches math at a university. But
yeah, I'm sure I've heard that, and I can't place what was the context or the lyrics, but I'm pretty sure I've heard it.
It's an old song, so it's basically like they're like one of the earlier changes they were doing to how they taught math in schools, and he's talking about how ridiculous. Basically, it's so simple that only a child can do it.
Yeah, well, what they were referring to as new math was basically the algebraic ordering of operators.
Yeah.
And the reason that was done is because there was no standard on it before that. So if you wrote like 1 + 2 × 3 + 4 × 5 + 6 × 7 + 8, a person might do that from left to right, or they might do it from right to left. Or they might just start in the middle somewhere, and you'll get different answers depending on what order you do it in. And some people would teach it one way, and other people would teach it another way. And so if a person did it the way they taught it, their students would understand them. But then students of somebody who did it a different way and taught it a different way would get it completely wrong. What's this? Iron Charioteer is asking, have you ever seen a Spanish-speaking mother give birth to a Portuguese-speaking baby?
Oh, that's great.
I haven't watched a lot of people give birth, and I haven't yet seen a baby born able to speak. So no, haven't seen that yet. However, the language of the parents is inherited by the child through learning, not through genetics. And so if the child is removed from that environment before they have a chance to inherit the parents' language, and they're placed in an environment where they will inherit some other language from someone other than their parents, they can still inherit a language from humanity, but it won't necessarily be the one of the family that they were born into, or any of the ones of the family that they were born into. So yeah, and this comes back to what I was starting to say a little while ago about when people talk about evolution. And if they talk about evolution and they mean specifically biological evolution, but they're not saying specifically biological evolution, that is speaking in a more vague form. They're being less precise, and you can do that and get away with it, provided the context is understood or assumed by people on both sides of the conversation, or all sides of the conversation. if you've got one person who's making that assumption and another one who's not, or worse yet, who's making a different assumption, that can lead to miscommunication. And so in the same sense, if a baby needs to be able to speak about evolution, chances are that baby's not going to need to speak specifically about reproductive biological evolution of populations, because the baby isn't going to have all the context to talk about anything that specific anyway. To be able to speak early on in life about change adding up, which is all evolution is, just the process of change accumulating, that seems very essential to learning to understand the world around us as a starting point. Languages do evolve, and they are passed on from one person to another.
Oh, yeah.
And languages do reproduce, and they do diversify. These are all things that life forms do, and in a sense, languages, when they're doing such things, can be considered living. As a matter of fact, we tend to distinguish between living and dead languages, as living languages are languages that are currently in use, and dead languages are languages that have fallen out of use and are therefore basically no longer evolving.
It makes me sad to think about like dead languages. It's like those are languages that basically, will eventually be lost completely to time. Like
not necessarily.
Well, true. That's true.
But I mean, Latin is considered a dead language, and it's still studied by a lot of people, and it is still being used to contribute to living languages.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Especially in science, because it's a dead language. They brought it into usage in science. I mean, it was already being used in science when it was still a living language, to the little extent that it was still living. I mean, it was already dying out, but because of the fact that it was considered a scholarly language, it got brought into science for that reason. And then later on, it was used even more in science, with the emphasis being on, well, because this language is dead, we can pretty much expect the meanings of words not to change over time. And so it's a better language for naming things, because we can take a descriptive name in Latin and label something with that descriptive name. And even if it doesn't describe it really well, at least we don't have to worry about, after 50 years, that phrase won't mean the same thing anymore.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's why, like, whenever a lot of people like, why do we use Latin for this anyways? Because language is, not used very often anymore. So it's not like the language, the meaning of words going to change. So the name that scientific name of that's not going to change really. It's going to mean the same thing.
Another interesting example is modern Hebrew, which ancient Hebrew, of course, died out completely. Yiddish basically took its place. Hebrew evolved into Yiddish, and they weren't interchangeable to the point where like a Yiddish speaker could read ancient Hebrew and know what it said. So from Hebrew writings that were associated with the Bible and the Torah, and from modern translations, I think the largest part of which was the King James version of the Bible. They looked at what these ancient Hebrew words appeared to mean based on modern translations of those writings, and reconstructed a Hebrew language from that. And that's where we got modern Hebrew from. So it's of course it's not ancient Hebrew. But it is similar. It's kind of like the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park, which they weren't exactly, I mean, that's of course fiction as opposed to reality, but nonetheless, the concept being there that, they took what DNA they could find from some particular dinosaur and then filled in the gaps with something else. So it wasn't really bringing back the same thing. But it was the closest they could get.
It's a close approximation. Yeah, that's true. But also, well, I don't remember what I was going to say, so never mind.
Really ironic. Really, well, I don't know. Irony is probably not the right word, but it is interesting though to think about the fact that in the original Jurassic Park, there was mention of the possibility that dinosaurs and birds were closely related, and that birds were actually descendants of dinosaurs, which we now know to be the case. And
well, you know, like a lot of people were mocking the movie for saying that too, though.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
I remember
because
people like mocking them for
at the
that.
time.
Yeah.
But the really funny thing about it though is, as it turns out, a lot of the dinosaurs in the original Jurassic Park should have had feathers on them, and they didn't know that because the fossils weren't good enough. They didn't have a clear enough fossil record to find out.
Well, yeah, because feathers really don't preserve all that well.
Yeah, they don't preserve all that well. And so we do know now that a lot of those dinosaurs were actually feathered dinosaurs. You know, there were avian therosaurs that had feathers and that were represented in Jurassic Park as, you know, like skinned or scaly but no feathers. And and now they could have so easily fixed that in you know, future releases of the movie, and they still could. Because really, I mean, think about it. They said that they were going to use, what was it, a frog or something, but an amphibian. They were going to use an amphibian or a reptile to fill in the missing genes.
Yeah.
I forget which one, but they weren't using a bird to fill in the missing genes. Now, the closest living relative to dinosaurs would be birds. If they had used birds to fill in those genes, they might have got feathers.
Well, so a lot of people assume that the closest relatives living to them now is like alligators and crocodiles and stuff like that, because, you know, they're still big animals. So, yeah. And, you know, there's that assumption that they have scales.
Yeah, those are somewhat close. But I mean, I'm just saying, if they wanted to fix that in later renditions and you know, bring the feathers in, they could have had both feathered and non-feathered versions, and they could have made it so scientifically realistic by just saying, well, you know, these are the ones that we made, you know, back before we had done enough genetic testing to find out what their closest relative was, and they don't have feathers because, you know, they got their extra genes from this thing. And here's the ones that we got that are, you know, closer to the original because, you know, we actually used bird genes to fill in the gaps.
Yeah. Well, that, like, you know, you can also probably be really hard for like all the action in the movies, but, you know, some people will say that you can go back and do edits in the movies using CGI now to actually put feathers on a lot of them. So they could actually change that in the movies too if they took the time to do it. Probably take a long ass time to do it, but they probably could.
Yeah, Iron Charioteer says, yes, that was a reference to your evolution is ubiquitous theory.
So
yeah, I don't know if you saw that. I had a debate with Kent Hovind on that, whether evolution is ubiquitous.
So I have a question about that. Would you consider Old English and you know, current English to be completely different languages then, since, you know, they're so vastly different? When did it turn from like Old English to New English? Like, when was the cutoff point? If we're going to talk about evolution.
Yeah, that's just it. There wasn't.
Yeah, exactly. But like, you know, if someone today looked at Old English, we wouldn't understand much of it at all because it's so different.
Most English speakers have heard of Old English and don't even really have a clue what it is. You know, I would say probably the average English speaker thinks that, you know, the King James version of the Bible is written in Old English. It isn't. No. That's Middle English, and it's kind of a modern Middle English.
Well, the closest thing that I've seen for like Old English was actually in cartoons and stuff. You know, they'll have like the old scripts and stuff, and they'll have like the things, and it's like people like, oh, I can't read that. I'm like, that's because that's in Old English. Like, it's legit English. It's just Old English. It uses a bunch of different stuff that we don't use these days.
Yeah, Old English is pretty far from modern English, and yeah. I mean, the thing is, we've got no audio recordings, so we don't really even know what Old English sounded like. We have ideas of what it sounded like, but we don't actually know. And I mean, if you built a time machine and you could only use it once, and, you know, you could go back in time to where people actually spoke Old English, There's
Dave
no
had
way
a
you could
question kind of
properly
like
prepare
that.
for that. What's that?
Dave, like, are you aware of Dave, like his critical questions thing? Like, he had a question about like if you could have a time machine that only goes back once, where would you go?
Yeah, if I had a time machine that could only go back once, I probably would never use it. At least not for myself.
Well, his questions are typically like you have to pick some things, and it was like some other stipulations for the question as well.
Yeah, well, in that case,
So,
you know, if that was going to be the case, I would probably do it on a live stream, and somewhere near the end of the live stream, I'd teleport myself back in time to near the beginning of the live stream, because at least that would be interesting.
just to mess with people. It's like, surprise.
So, you know, like I could have maybe like an hour-long conversation with myself before, you know, going back in time.
I don't like myself enough to have a conversation with myself for that long. I couldn't do it. I'd get tired of myself for like after a while.
Yeah, I wouldn't find it all that terribly interesting either, but it would be at least entertaining for other people.
Yeah, I'm sure someone would find it entertaining at least. It would entertain somebody. That's true.
I've actually thought about doing that just as like a April Fool's joke or something, you know, to just like script the whole thing and you know, do it, but not really.
See, for that, like there used to be like a joke about going into like a grocery store or something like once a week or something, the same time every day, and like asking a question and like shit, it didn't work, and then like finally like go in there and ask them, you know, like what year it was, like what year is it? That's what it was. And when they say the year, like, or the date, you act like, yes, it worked. It finally worked, and act like you're from the future, just to see if they believe you. To mess with people.
Yeah, that could be interesting.
It could, because there's always going to be that one person that's going to believe you, at least.
But yeah, I do want to add. You know, I started work on it, and I lost where the work I started went, so I'm going to have to start it again. But I do want to add a chapter to my book near the beginning. There's a few things I want to add, but I do want to put a full theory of evolution in there. And I don't mean a theory of biological evolution. I mean a theory of evolution. I've also kind of wanted to make you know, some videos on non-biological evolution. Maybe you know, one thing I'd kind of like to do, and I might schedule that for like tomorrow or something. Who knows? But you know, I'd like to make a video where I basically go on the internet and run searches for stuff about evolution and just ignore all of the biological stuff and just look at anything else, because, you know, biological evolution is something that gets talked about a lot. But then when people try to talk about evolution and they're not trying to talk about biological evolution, it too often gets assumed that what they're talking about is biological evolution. And there goes an opportunity to talk about, you know, evolution itself. I mean, like, languages don't evolve in the same way that living species of biology do.
Well, the thing about that is that if you just look up evolution, you're going to find mostly stuff about biological evolution. So you would have to like put, you know, some stipulations on it. You would have to put in like evolution of language or something to at least specify what you're looking for.
Well, here, let's do this, okay? Just evolution. Let's see. There's evolution Wikipedia, videos of evolution. Let's see. Evolution dictionary, theory of evolution. That's probably biology. Evolution media. That's a company apparently. Here, do a YouTube search. An interesting way to do it is if you just do like that.
Like what?
Just, oh, you can't. Can you see that? Is it showing on the screen?
Okay, yes, it is. I'm sorry, I'm on my phone, so I'm having to look at it on the on my laptop.
Yeah, if you just do like EVOL, you'll get
Suggestions,
and
yeah.
evolving and evolution and stuff like that. But you also get a bunch of these things that are like the word love spelled backward and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's also like a health food company called Evolve, which is love backwards. So.
Or you can do evolution of, and that's a little more specific. And here, the evolution of Haley Pham and her content, evolution of music, evolution of Godzilla, evolution of Pennywise, evolution of dance, evolution of Chucky, evolution of girls groups, evolution of Super Mario games. Now notice, I just put evolution of. I didn't even have to specify, other than biology. And so far, none of these are biology.
Well, did you just try just with evolution without the of part of it?
Not
and
just
see
now,
if that
but
changes
I can.
it?
Oh, it will. But you'll still get some of that.
Okay. That's
Pearl
good.
Jam, do the evolution. Where do humans come from? Okay, that's biological, obviously. How evolution works. Notice they're not saying how biological evolution works.
Well, that is good.
Implied.
So that's awesome.
It's implied. Someone says, I broke evolution with an auto clicker in ecosystem. So that's apparently in a video game. And again, probably talking about biological evolution, but in that case, a simulation of biological evolution. Evolution, it's a thing. Again, probably biological. What is
that's
evolution?
in a game
Again, biological.
from the video. That's pretty neat, though.
No, here's evolution of Chucky, evolution of Godzilla. What is the evidence for evolution? Again, probably biological. Again, it usually gets assumed, but when you assume it instead of expressing it, you close off the possibility of clear communication beyond that scope. Let's see, common misconceptions about evolution. I don't know, but again, probably biological.
Probably.
There's an album named Evolution from Ape to Man, that's kind of humorous because we're still apes.
Oh, well, if you talk to like Christians, they do not like it when you say that humans are animals or apes. Oh my God, they will lose their shit if you say that.
Well, as a matter of fact, the definition of apes used to exclude humans explicitly.
Why am I not surprised?
And they did that on purpose because there were already apes other than humans that were counted as human in many cultures and in many languages. So like for example, orangutans were considered humans by a lot of people. So they made a definition of apes that excluded humans on purpose, and that has since been dropped in science. They don't use that anymore. Apes include humans explicitly. So yeah,
well, scientifically, but like if you talk to like a lot of Christians and other religions, they'll get pissed off if you say that humans are apes.
Yeah, well, if they want to argue the case about monkeys, that's a little easier because monkeys are, the monkey group is paraphyletic. Like I said, apes were not originally paraphyletic. They were monophyletic, and they were made paraphyletic intentionally because of the fact that people didn't want to acknowledge the fact that humans are apes. Monkeys, on the other hand, ended up just sort of coincidentally grouped into two separate groups of Old World monkeys and New World monkeys, and their ancestors, which of course would also be monkeys, weren't considered monkeys because they weren't Old World monkeys and they weren't New World monkeys. But if you count Old World monkeys and New World monkeys and their last shared common ancestor and all of the descendants of that last shared common ancestor, then humans are monkeys.
Oh, that's true.
So,
I just know about the whole humans aren't apes thing because my family lost their shit when someone said that humans are apes.
Yeah, it happens.
Like, they lost their shit whenever I was talking about, the scientific name for humans, like the whole genus and all that stuff. Like, no, we're not. Like, yeah, we are. Like, it doesn't branch off until this part of it. It's up until this part, we're the same thing.
If you define ape, okay, just doing that on Google, define ape. Let's see what Google says. A large primate that lacks a tail, including the gorilla, chimpanzee, orangutans, and gibbons. See also great ape and gibbon. Okay, now they didn't mention including humans, but notice the description. It says a large primate, humans are primates, lacks a tail, humans lack a tail. That's it for their definition. They just included us right there without having to explicitly do so. It says also, see also great ape. Now great ape is a subset of ape, and humans are also great apes. So if we go over to that one, it says a large ape of a family closely related to humans, including gorillas, orangutan, and chimpanzees, but excluding the gibbons and anthropoid ape. Now there again, they didn't explicitly say humans are included, but they did say large ape of a family closely related to humans. So
closely related to humans, though, but not humans.
Well, humans are closely related to humans, so we are
very closely related to humans. That's true.
We are very closely related to humans, and you only have to go back 2 generations to know that humans evolved from apes, because your parents were apes and your grandparents were apes, and you're not the same as your parents or your grandparents, so there you go.
I'd be kind of worried if I was the same as my parents, to be honest, but yeah.
That's sexual reproduction for you. It happens rather quickly. And here, let's see. Oh yeah, here you go. Okay. Great apes. Over on the side thing here, it says hominidae. That's the taxonomic classification of great apes, the scientific name, hominidae. And under hominidae, or hominidae, if I suppose, depending which phonetics you want to use, under that, here's lower classifications. In other words, included within hominidae. Notice orangutan is one of those included in there, and homininae is another one included in there. And look what they have a picture of under homininae.
Yep.
African apes. This particular subset of African apes is humans, or hominids, or hominins in this case. The great apes are hominids, and then the hominins are a subcategory of hominids. And if we go to hominini classifications of that, we'll get hominini.
Yeah,
hominini. And if we go to lower classifications of hominini, do they have lower classifications? No, they're not showing them. But
I'm trying being immature, and hominini just amuses me. It sounds adorable.
Homo is a lower classification of hominini. So if we click on Homo over here, we get the genus. Is it? Oh, they're showing hominini as a lower classification of Homo. So that would be why I got that in the wrong order. And
I've also seen people get mad about being called Homo as well.
Yeah, actually, if you're familiar with Aaron Ra's series on systematic classification of life, I had suggested to him at one point in time, because he puts in a lot of the episodes of that. There's 50 episodes to it in total, and in a lot of the episodes, he puts a little pun or a little jab at the end regarding whatever category, whatever class he's working on. Like, do you have enough backbone? Do you have the backbone to admit you're a vertebrate? And so I suggested to him at one point in time. He didn't use it. He did say he wanted to, but he never ended up using it. I suggested to him that when he got to the genus Homo, that he should ask, "Are you man enough to admit you're a Homo?"
That'll be funny. There'll be people that would get offended by it, though. I'm pretty sure it's probably why he didn't use it.
That's probably why he didn't use it, because that was a little too edgy. But still.
But like, yeah, there's a lot of people that get offended by that. They're like, I'm not a homosexual. Yes, you are. That's part of your classification scientifically. Is that's what you are.
Yeah.
It's not saying that you're that, your sexuality or anything. That's just like your classification scientific.
Yeah. And we're also eukaryotes. And
Yep.
we share that in common with elephants and pine trees. That was a funny one that, when Aaron Ra asked Kent Hovind to come up with two different species, two different species that scientists would say are closely related, and that he would say are not related at all. And
I remember that was hilarious.
The best he could come up with is an elephant and a pine tree, as if that's something that scientists would say are closely related.
Yeah, he likes to joke about that Hovind does. He's like, I'm not related to an elephant or a pine tree. Like, dude, yes you are. You're also related to a fucking banana, so.
Yeah, and he also he also doesn't seem to be able to keep track of it. I'm pretty sure he's doing it on purpose, but he doesn't seem to be able to keep track of the fact that evolution only works in one direction. That it's not like it's not like just because elephants and pine trees shared a common ancestor that therefore elephants are ancestors of pine trees or pine trees are ancestors of elephants. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, that kind of stuff, I'm pretty sure he's purposefully misunderstanding it and just tries to say it like to be funny and
seems to misrepresent it on purpose.
Because I will give Kent Hovind one thing: he's a really great speaker.
Yeah, he's well, within the limitation of the speaking he does, which all seems to be well rehearsed.
Well, yes, but like subjectively, like for stuff that you'd look for in like someone who's a good speaker, he does inflection. He's very animated. He's very engaging. Yeah. He's good at it.
Yeah. I do have some curiosity though with regard to would he come off as a good speaker on something that he's not prepared for.
I don't think he would, because a lot of what his things that he seems to be really good at is because he's practicing it. Because you'll notice whenever someone does try to get him, or someone does get him off script or something he's not familiar with, he fumbles a bit. He's not as engaging or as great at it as he would be for something he's very familiar with and practiced on.
Yeah, that was one thing that I very much caught him off guard. When it came to the evolution discussion, because he was expecting that all he would have to do is bring up things other than life evolving, and there he just won the conversation because modern evolutionary theory doesn't account for all of that. Well, the problem is modern biological evolutionary theory doesn't have to account for that stuff because it's about biology. And if you recognize the fact that that's about biology and not just about evolution, then that sort of explains why it's talking about biology.
Yeah.
And if you want to understand biological evolution, there are at least two things you have to understand: biology and evolution. Well, evolution is the easy part. I wish more people would figure that out. Evolution is simple to understand. Biological evolution is hard to understand because biology is hard to understand. If you fully understand biology, you've come a long way toward understanding biological evolution. But if you don't understand evolution, you can't understand biological evolution because it's a subset. And that's where most people make their mistakes. Sadly, most people are making their mistake in understanding biological evolution, not in their understanding of biology, but in their understanding of evolution. And if we would just teach evolution outside of biology, that wouldn't happen.
Well, then you'd have to find out, where in the curriculum you would have to teach biology.
Everywhere.
Well, yeah, everywhere. But
I mean, think about it. History is taught in pretty much every subject. Now, history is my worst subject but I still have to deal with it. I've had to learn history with regard to computer languages. I've had to learn history with regard to computer hardware, all kinds of stuff like that I've had to deal with because, you can't get away from it. Now,
oh yeah,
to me,
whenever I was in college for web design, like they were like having us, learn the evolution of that, and I'm like, and the history of it, and I'm like, what is this to do? Like, I just want to learn the code. Like, I don't care about this part of it.
But exactly what you just said. That's what I was going to say. I would rather learn the evolution of it than the history of it, because to me, that's more important.
Well, and also like the evolution of it would, tell you why it does certain things. That's true. Right. Instead of, just like, well, before it did this and we don't do that anymore and just drop it at that. It's like,
and the thing
why do we no longer do that?
When you focus on it from a history point of view, then it's a question of what things were recorded. It's a question of what history was recorded. And a lot of it is completely irrelevant to the stuff that the subject you're trying to learn. I mean,
true.
For example, you don't have to know who Charles Babbage is to understand how a computer works. It's
good. I don't know who that is.
It's not necessary. You don't have to know. You don't have to know who any of the people were. Now, is it nice to know? Sure. It's trivia, but it's nice to know. But you don't have to know who any of the people were that were involved in any of it. What you do have to know is, for example, when someone talks about a byte, what do they mean by that? And if you're reading an older book where it meant something else, what might it mean? I mean, the evolution of these things is much more important than the history. And by the evolution of it, I mean two things: the evolutionary path that it took, which is a subset of the history, and also the way that it evolved, and therefore the ways that it can evolve, or at least a subset of the ways that it can evolve, because certain things can evolve in certain ways. And so if you understand how something has evolved, then you understand ways that it can evolve. And biology doesn't have the same restrictions on how it can evolve as, say, for example, the evolution of a mathematical formula as you're solving it in, say, algebra. You take a mathematical formula and you make certain changes to it, and a chain of changes evolves it into a solution of a certain type. That's evolution as well, but it has completely different restrictions than biological evolution. And of course, what those changes are depends on, or what those restrictions are depends on what kinds of changes can happen. That's the the main difference there. Now in biology, you've got what kinds of changes can happen, and then you've got what can allow those changes to pass on, or what can prevent those changes from being passed on.
I apparently need.
Did your audio drop? You stopped in the middle of a sentence.
My internet's being weird. I'm sorry. I need to go because internet, and also my feline overlord is letting me know that it's time to play fetch. Apparently.
All right.
She deserves attention.
I should probably.
And we've been at this for over 2 hours now.
Yeah, I should probably end this anyway. If you want to hang around backstage just for a moment, I'd appreciate it.
Alrighty, no worries.
I don't think anybody else is gonna jump in here, so I'll go ahead and end this one and say goodbye to everybody. And like I said, set up that other one sometime soon for talk on non-biological evolution, and maybe I can look at some of those. Do a search like I just did there, and look at some of the videos that come up, and just go through some of the things. What are they? There's a evolution of dance video.
The only thing about doing that is since it's on YouTube, you'll have to be careful about whether or not the other people have music on their video, because if their video has music, you'll get copyright strike.
Yeah, that's a good point. Stop it right away if it's playing music. I'll have to keep that in mind. Yeah, but even just looking at what some of the things are, and just to talk a little bit about them, and maybe I can get someone to come on and give some of their thoughts on it as well. But this is stuff, like I said, I've thought about it a lot over time. I've done some formal work in formulating sort of generalized theory of evolution. I've got to get the whole thing out and published, and that'll be one of a bunch of stuff planned in the book I'm working on. So we'll see how that turns out, or if I ever manage to finish it. But the way I look at it, it's never really going to be finished, because there's always room for it to evolve more. So somewhere along the way, I've just got to call it good enough. At any rate, gonna go ahead and end the broadcast, and thanks everyone for showing up. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, I hope you'll consider doing so. Bye.